Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 23rd, 2009. I'm joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Paul Koretz and Bernard Parks. We have a quorum, and we're going to start the meeting. There are a few items, colleagues, that have been suggested to go on consent, and if I could rattle them off, and if you agree with me, we'll move forward with them. The first is item number 1. And then we have item number 2, item number 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. What's 6? 6 is a DOT and CA relative amending with...
I would just, I can go with a consent on 6. I would just ask that they explain for the committee report to the clerk a better rationale as to why these RFPs went beyond the deadline and how we got into the month-to-month situation and how we'll correct that in the future.
Would you like him to come up and say that on the record?
You can just ask.
Okay. Okay, we have cards on number 6, so we're not going to do number 6 on consent. We have one card.
Yes, just one.
Okay. Okay. But you heard the point of Mr. Parks. Okay, so if we can have approval on 1, 2, 3, and 4. So moved. Mr. Koretz, any problem with 1, 2, 3, and 4? Okay. So moved. Item number 6, we have a card, and it's from Arnold Sachs.
Reginald, 1 or 2 minutes? 1 or 2 minutes? How many minutes?
Oh, 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Good afternoon, thank you. Arnold Sachs. Your DOT, you want contract amendments with 5 firms for third-party transit audits and inspections. So my question or my involvement here is that third-party transit audits and inspections. Will the third-party transit audits and inspection look into third parties involved in some of the transportation issues that this committee faces? At a taxi cab board meeting, there was a problem with bandit cabs being released from police impound because the vehicle owner registration and the lien owner registration are different. And so companies take advantage of that. So I was wondering, that's a third-party audit that should be looked into. What about the businesses that are licensed by the city? I'm sure that the cab companies that are licensed by the city use the same technique if their cabs get impounded, and they probably happen more than once. What about how does private owners of taxi cabs versus company owners of taxi cabs, those are third-party issues. Who's insured there? Do they look into that? How about the ownership of the seals? There was a story in the LA Times regarding drivers having to make it very difficult. And the story went on to say that the city seal can go from anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. How can that be possible? The city sells the seal to the company for $30,000, and they turn around and sell it for $60,000? Where's the math there? I mean, does that get audited? These are just questions. You have a third party here. And inspections. Who does those inspections? What do they look at? What criteria do they use when they're going out to inspect? Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion on item number 6?
Yes, I'll move to number 6 with the prior comments that we asked the LADOT to get with the clerk and advise a better rationale as to the delay in the RFP deadline and the month-to-month situation, how we correct it and how we not get in that situation again.
Very good. Thank you for that, Mr. Parks. Okay. Mr. Kretz, for that. Okay, on consent, we've moved item number 6. Okay, what I'd like to do, colleagues, is because we have folks in here from the taxi cab world, and they need to get back to work too, that we take everything else out of order and go forward with those issues, which are item number 10 of the regular agenda, and the special agenda, it's item number 2. Okay, so with the permission of my colleagues, we will rearrange the agenda so that we can get on with that issue right now.
Just as right around 3, I may have to run the person that will come back.
Yeah, right.
Okay, item number 10 is the Rosendahl Outcome motion and directing DOT to report relative to the status of the contract for the review of the city's tax cap regulatory program. And then item 2 on the special agenda is the DOT report relative to a contract for the review of the city's tax cap regulatory program.
Very good, appreciate that. I see David Smith, this says Transportation Committee, item number 1 on the special meeting. So that'll be for another moment, okay, because we're on item number 2 of this special agenda and item number 10 of the regular one. We have a lot of cards on this, so if I mention your name, we got 4 mics, so let's put 4 of us up there at a time. We'll start with, and I apologize for pronunciation, Khalil is the first name. Come on up. You see what I mean? I'm not right there. And then we have the next name is Sentayehiil. Here he comes. I know he's I'm a fan of his. Betty Hung, come on up, Betty. Okay. Julie Sue. Great. Okay, that's the first 4, and we'll just start with the 4 of you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go a minute since we have a lot of people, unless there's an objection. And if you hear the buzzer goes and you need more than that minute, just finish your thought.
You can't block their view.
Can you do it over there? Yeah. On the wall? That's pretty good. We can all look over there. There you go. Very cool. I mean, my eyes can't see it, obviously. I'm blind. Okay, first, could I ask staff to explain what these 2, read those 2 items, item number 10 and item number 2? Please, Maria, yeah.
Item number 10 is the Rosendahl Outcome motion, DOT to report relative to the status of the contract for the review of the city's tax cap regulatory program. And item 2 on the special agenda is the DOT report relative to a contract for review of the city's tax cap regulatory program.
Okay. What I'd like to do is let you make your comments. DOT, you're listening to this, and when you come up with your responses, please incorporate what you've heard from public comment as well. Okay. You're up first, sir.
Oh, yes.
Your name for the record.
Good afternoon first, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Khalil Haydarnia, also known as Robin Good, not Robin Hood.
Very good. Go for it.
Okay.
Start us clock again, please.
Yeah. Oh, do I have a specific time?
1 minute.
How many?
Yeah, 1 minute.
1 minute?
You see that thing there?
It's going.
Okay, so you guys
Going.
reset it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Start again at 1 minute. Go for it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
I know.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm speaking on the behalf of the taxi drivers and the taxi industry and a little bit Department of Transportation. And I'm an architect from Lafayette, Louisiana. Did a bunch of things since 32 years in this industry, off and on. And I spoke with LATWA. They basically talk about Los Angeles Taxi Worker Alliance, and they're not talking about the public. Because in my opinion, public is first. I mean, the client is first. I spoke with Mr. Robertson, whom was referred by Ms. Rita Robinson, which I have a lot of respect for, and I have certain things that I think I agree with Department of Transportation. I don't believe, I feel for the drivers. They work hard, and there are some people who doing illegal things, and they take their bread away. But in any event, I agree with maybe 70% of LATWA, but I would put that name global partial taxi management for first client and then owner, lease driver, alliance. That means the public is first, because I give you a notice that I was talking about this matter, and a driver whom has to be here, I was talking to a friend, kind of walked in and said, I don't agree 100% with LATWA, but I feel for them, I feel for the thing. And he come to me and says, oh, don't give blah, blah, in the front of a place, 7 and Figueroa. And then he says, all I care is to get the medallion. And I say, how about the public?
Okay.
And he goes, and he says, F the public.
Okay, no, we don't want to say that about anybody.
I just say F.
But I appreciate what you just said. If you want to talk more with staff after the meeting, go ahead and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Untitled Chapter from Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. Thank you very much for this opportunity. 1 minute, we presented our case to you so many times. You do understand where we are. Also, DOT knows that we talk to the general manager, assistant manager. They know what we are facing every day. They did not actually understand us, or they didn't care. They brought the same contractor who gave us this franchise slavery in 2000, and that's why we are here. We need independent and who is not working with the company's organization to give us independent views. We think this city council, this mayor, we think this is our opportunity. The most progressive mayor and city councils will stop years of abuse and stop it today by rescinding this contract. Wow. And if I say something, I was in San Francisco September 1st and 2nd for International Taxi Workers Alliance, and after I told them our issue, you know what they told us? They said, you guys are in the 60s, deep south in the 60s. Please bring us back to, up to date and be like New York, other cities too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was supported right, and please, that was supported, please.
Thank you all for coming too, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your comments. Betty?
Thank you. My name is Betty Hung. I'm an attorney with the Inner City Law Center here on behalf of LATWA. We're here to discuss the lack of transparency and integrity in the contracting process, and to call for rescission of the contract with Nelson Nygaard and for the RFP process to start anew. As the DOT itself has acknowledged, they violated the process that the city itself established and that the city announced publicly, and that the public relied on. Not only did they ignore a city council motion passed November 18, 2008 that directed the DOT to report back with the recommended consultant, not the chosen consultant, but the one that was recommended, but they also ignored the process set forth in the RFP, whereby the selection of the consultant was to be approved both by the Board of Taxi Cab Commissioners and the City Council. And instead what they did is they awarded this $250,000 contract at a time of fiscal crisis to the same consultant that led the franchising study for the city in 2000, and so are asking him to scrutinize the very taxi system that he himself created. Not only that, he has a conflict of interest with taxi cab management, as we've laid out in our submission to you. The council, the Transportation Committee, has an opportunity to stand up for transparency and ethics in city government, and to create a 21st century green taxi system that integrates taxi cabs into a multimodal public transit system, that can green the taxi system, and that provides living wages for drivers. So we ask you to stand up and do the right thing.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Julie's going to speak next, and then we want Gray Palmer, Victor Narrow, apologize on the next one, ANJAHDE Victoria Lobo, okay? And then Henry HUESTA.
I'm
Hi.
Julie Sue Hai with the Asian Pacific American Legal Center. And my colleagues have already described the conflict of interest issues. Those are issues that would have been raised before this esteemed committee had we been given the opportunity as was provided for in the RFP. And those issues were not raised before you because this contract was not brought before you before it was signed. When the LADOT sidelined the Taxi Cab Commission in this contract, the train started to leave the station. And when they began contract negotiations without coming to City Council, the train started to pick up steam. And when Jaime de la Vega signed off on the contract on behalf of the mayor without the proper approval of the City Council, it looked like there was no stopping it. But now the issue is in your hands with the chance of stopping this train and putting it on the right track. I know there are some pragmatic concerns about rescinding the contract, and the easy thing to do now is to move to approve the contract and rubber stamp the flawed process that has taken place to date. But each of you is known not for doing the easy thing, but for doing the hard thing when it's the right thing to do. And the reality is that with a $250,000 contract and the future of the taxi industry at stake, it is simply irresponsible to say, well, these mistakes were made in the past and now we've got to live with them. Drivers have been told that for far too long. Taxis are an untapped resource in this city for developing a comprehensive transportation plan that would better serve the people of Los Angeles and reflect the city's commitment to equity and justice. And we are hopeful that with your great leadership, we will not squander these opportunities by continuing with this flawed contract. Let's do it right. We have the chance.
Thank you for your comments. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gray Palmer. I'm a member of Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. In some of our language, for example, franchise slavery, well, it may sound like bombast, it may sound like an exaggeration, but I'm here to tell you, I'm a lease driver. I'm a member of the lowest class of workers in this public utility. Last week, I worked more than 70 hours, and I made $11. Yeah, that's because we have to pay a fixed lease amount. And the city has taken a laissez-faire attitude toward the operations of this business. We have fixed lease amounts, completely unregulated, and there's not enough business to support both the cars, the owner's costs, the company costs, and the workers. It's a disaster. Well, my time's up, but I think I made one good point.
Okay, well, thank you for your point. You can leave, because we can have others keep coming, rotating in.
Good.
Go ahead, Victor.
Okay, good morning. My name is, good afternoon. My name is Victor Naro. I'm project director for the UCLA Labor Center. We're part of the Institute for Research on Labor and Employment at UCLA. And back in 2006, the Institute awarded a research grant to Professor Gary Blasey from the law school and Jackie Levitt from the UCLA Department of Urban Planning to do an extensive survey and report on an industry. And I'm going to submit this for the record so you can read the report. But just a couple of highlights. I mean, the average taxi worker in Los Angeles works 72 hours a week to support their families. Wages $8.39 an hour, which is far less than the city's own living wage. No health insurance at all in this industry. 2/3 of the drivers have no health insurance. Even for their children, they don't have health insurance. This report documents the corruption that exists in the cooperative system. And I think, really, I've managed the city day labor program before in Los Angeles. We had to do an RFP process. We had to get a contract. When we worked on the strike-free procurement ordinance to get the monitors, we had to go through an RFP process. I really encourage the city to go through the proper channels to do this the right way because so much is at stake here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Anjali Da Victoria Lobo, and I'm here on behalf of SEIU USWW Local 1877 in support for LATWA's call to rescind the Nelson Nygaard contract, as well as LATWA's call for a new and more transparent RFP process to select a consultant to review and recommend improvement to Los Angeles' taxi industry. SEIU USWW has supported LATWA since its inception, and we believe that by working together, we have at this time an unprecedented opportunity to create a truly green taxi system, something for this new century that improves public transportation, protects the environment, as well as improving taxi drivers' working conditions. We'd also like to reiterate the critical necessity for a full inclusion of LATWA at all levels as we move forward for such changes to take place. In our engagement as USWW with you and your fellow council members, we have seen you show great foresight in keeping LA healthy, progressive, and a model city for the nation. And we feel that this is yet another chance to do so again by truly improving our city's taxi industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And before Henry speaks, could we ask James Lafferty to come on up, Eileen Ma, and Amand Fesehaye. Henry, you're up.
My name is Henry Huerta. I'm on behalf of the Clean Car Wash campaign. We are here in support of the Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. We feel that the contract that was awarded to the Nelson Nygaard team, led by the same consultant, William Rodman, who in 2000 laid the foundation for the current taxi system that has been called modern sharecropping on wheels, should have never taken place without public or stakeholder input and should not be allowed into the city of Los Angeles. Furthermore, as an on-call consultant to the taxi industry, William Rodman has a conflict of interest and ties to the taxi industry management, who are in source of drivers' sweatshop working conditions. We agree that awarding this contract with no public hearing and circumventing a city council reviews subverts the city's contracting process, undermines public trust in the city's claim to engage with public through such processes, as well as totally impedes the fundamental positive changes to our city's taxi cab industry and its workers.
Thank you, appreciate that. My old friend from my television days. Just
How are you?
For full disclosure
Good
here.
to see you.
James Lafferty.
Yes, Jim Lafferty, Director of the National Lawyers Guild in Los Angeles. Not to be too repetitive, but I can't help it. It's hard to imagine a more blatant conflict of interest than for the LADOT to have hired as a consultant to help the city design its new taxi system, the same guy and firm that designed the present system, and who's also on call as a consultant to the taxi owners themselves. And of course, as has also been pointed out, to add insult to injury, in doing so, it didn't follow the directions of this committee or the city council in holding a transparent, open hearing. And as Victor has already noted, we're talking about a long history here of the city taking a hands-off attitude towards the taxi owners when it comes to allegations of fraud, corruption, or sharp practices within taxi companies. Finally, as is clear to any honest broker who has examined the plight of the taxi owners in L.A., the current system is, as has been noted, modern sharecropping. And if this body does not reverse the decision of the LADOT to hire, in essence, the same guys who helped design our current sharecropper system, then the fix is in. So this committee has it within its power, ought not to stand for the thumbing of its nose from that body that selected this consultant in the first place, ought to now undo the damage that's been done before it gets any deeper, do the right thing, stand up for what is justice and for what you yourselves demanded, rescind that contract, and start fresh.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Eileen Ma. I'm with the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance. And we're here also to ask you to rescind the contract with Nelson Nygaard and also to call for a new, transparent, and public process for the decision on who should complete the study of the LA taxi industry. Kiwa has been a strong supporter of LATWA since the beginning, and it's because we believe that the workers who make this industry work and who make this transportation system work in the city should have a strong voice in its governance and policymaking and in every decision that affects their work and their lives. And so we think that, a decision as to how to study to improve the taxi industry should include their voices as to who should help do that study and what should inform that study. So we think that awarding a contract with no public hearing and without their involvement is a detriment to to our public transportation system or our taxi transportation system. So again, we're urging you to rescind the contract. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Before Armand speaks, can we ask MOGES Windertaker? And then, I'm terrible on names, ACTAYE, last name is ASFAW. Then I got another tongue twister, folks. Shamilis
Yeah, you got it.
Tadesemagal? Wow. Okay, forgive me. Armand.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Aman Fisai, yellow cab driver and a member with the Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. I just want to quickly touch on the human side of the drivers. We, the drivers, know what's going on with this industry and what's going on with those who lead the industry. And I just want to say this with due respect. I don't think this community has ever driven a taxi. So personally, as a taxi driver, and my fellow taxi drivers know what's going on in the streets. We want to be able to own our own business. The reason why we're asking for you to rescind this contract is that way, like, the next study or next study that's going to come your way, we want that to be done in a way that will benefit me and other drivers, because you want to have a driver who wakes up every morning thinking, I own a business, I want to be able to go out in the morning, make money, support my family, and at the end of the day, of course, provide a good service. You have a happy driver providing happy service. But now, the reason why we are asking for you to rescind this is the ultimate question, the ultimate goal with what we want is the medallion issue. With that, we will be able to own our own business. With that comes a health benefit for the drivers. With that comes the right to associate and organize. With that, we're going to have workman's compensation. If something were to happen to me or my other fellow drivers, we'll be taken care of. With that, we'll have unemployment benefits. All those things will be attained once the study is done properly. We don't want any bias, we don't want any backdoor deal or inside deal that takes place between the Nelson Nygaard and, of course, the company I drive for. I'm a yellow cab driver. I'm proud to be driving a yellow cab, but at the same time, I have some issues.
Okay.
I just want to make sure you guys do the right thing and rectify the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Say your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Mogas Wandimtaka. I'm a yellow cab driver and owner. I'm happy to be here because I've seen you guys for a couple of times and you have a good reception. And I wish the DOT have the same heart like you do. The thing is, the reason why I'm here is the DOT and the management companies, they work together and they never have any room and space for our complaints. We are the only one who can tell you about this 2000 franchise, how it affects our lives. And we are giving the best service, 7 days a week, 24-hour service. Our customers are very happy because we are out there to do the jobs. But at the same time, these companies, they're not competing each other. They just sit down, and then because of this harassment and corruption, people are going out and do some illegal things like bandits and TCP. This happened because of this corruption. And then we want you to do the good judgment and do the best for the city of Los Angeles taxi drivers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
My name is Altai Asfau. I'm a taxi driver. I'm owner and member of LATWA. I'm here to say 2 points. The 2010 contract was slavery. They forced us to work 7 days a week. No vacation, no sick leave. You die, they sell your car. You sick in the hospital, still they collect the money. That kind of 2000 contract. We need a new contract. We need a medallion system. That's what we need. We don't have to hassle with the management. Management is there. They might tell you right now here, they are for their own money. They want me to slave all my life, paying to them $300, $400. They don't fix my car. They don't pump the gas. This is the people they try to get the same contract. So please, just help us. We are dying in the streets. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that very much. Could we ask David Shapiro to come on up and Linda, if it's Depp, I think. And then let's have, is this Jose Oraaumen? Good, come on up. And Joe Linton? Okay. Sir?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Himadas Tadessa Mikael. I am a United driver, owner, member. I have been driving taxi for the last 13 years in the city of Los Angeles, with no problem. The system that we have right now is a system that we cannot make sure that we are independent business owners. Although we paid a lot of money to acquire our vehicles, our position now, but we cannot make progress because every 5 years it has to be changed. We want the medallion system to be acquired, and the contractor that the city acquired now is the same one that did the 2000. We want to change. We want somebody who is not bad, who will give us the medallion system. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Sir, your name for the record.
How do you do? David Shapiro. I speak as the founder of the movement which broke through the yellow cab monopoly, and as the 7-year president of United Independent Taxi, and currently on the board of directors, and currently driving my own cab because of the economic situation, which hardly helps, but it's a living. I have submitted to you for the new committee my thinking of 32 years experience, where I've been everything from a taxi driver to a CEO. I've traveled all over the big cities of the United States. I've gone to all the International Taxi Association conventions, wherever they were, until some years ago. And Europe, I always talked with cab drivers. Medallions, as I have written them, and the housing within which the administration of taxis occur, as written in my report, could serve as a model for the world. And I wanted to say separate words about, the medallion system could be put in fairly quickly. There are real difficulties about changing the whole structure, infrastructure, and making the now franchise types the employees of the drivers. Second point about Nelson Nygaard. I spent 2 years in Santa Monica exposing them. They are an old line company with offices all over the United States. They're very powerful apologists for the franchise owners of the United States, period. The lead guy in L.A. was responsible for the 2,000 franchises of L.A., which removed United Independent Taxi and independent taxi owners.
Okay, make a final comment.
I will. From the law, making us seem like franchises to you today. They are a loaded operation and should not be kept aboard, or it won't be a fair. It'll be boilerplate franchise.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Delp. I'm the director of the UCLA Labor, Occupational Safety, and Health Program, and I teach classes at the UCLA School of Public Health, and I'm a taxi rider. I want to make 2 short points here. One is that the working conditions that taxi drivers face can be life-threatening in 2 ways. One is assaults and violence are the more overt problem, but also job stressors related to working conditions that lead to cardiovascular disease, or the silent killer, as it's called. Victor Nardo already mentioned the UCLA landmark study that Drs. Levitt and Blasey did, and you have a copy of that. We are doing some additional analysis of the health data contained therein, and are quite concerned about the working conditions that contribute to health problems, and about the lack of access to health care that about 2/3 of the taxi drivers experience. Second, final point is that I believe that it's critical that the new process to renegotiate the franchises must address these working conditions that contribute to health problems, and that the public must have confidence, both the public and the drivers. And to pull in a previous comment, let's just say happy, healthy drivers make happy riders.
My name is Jose Luis Orellana. I'm from the Bell Taxi Company, a board member elected by the membership to represent their interests. And I feel that it's my duty and obligation to come before this committee and let you know there is only so much that I can do within the board of directors meetings. And what I'd like to say is that if the cameras were to be rolling right now, and this was to be a Hollywood movie set, we will be thinking that we're in the past, when the city was so crooked and corrupt. Many movies have been made about the city of Los Angeles, the corruption within the city, the corruption within the city hall, the police department, and every level that you can look at it. For a while, I thought that was part only of the movies. But in reality, that is alive today. The All Boys Network is alive and well, and that's what we're trying to show here. They're trying to bypass the committee people that maybe were asleep at the wheel and didn't take the responsibility to the fullest extent. I mean, every single day that goes by, we see examples on the news as to what happened with the SEC. The Securities Exchange Commission didn't do what they were supposed to do. The Central Bank Reserve didn't do what they're supposed to do. We've been told lies all the time, and we're tired of the lies, and we're fed up with it, sick and tired, and we know that the power lies within this committee to finally empower us, the drivers that do the work, to have the medallion. Well, we're not saying that we want to get rid of the rules and regulations. Rules and regulations have to be in place to continue doing the work that we do, providing service to the public. What we want is us to be empowered with that medallion so we can go to the bank and say, here, give me a loan so I can buy a new car, so I can provide better service to the public. All of us been doing this for a long, long time, and we're not going away. We just want to be respected. We want to be empowered with that medallion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Now, there are a few more cards here. I just want to make sure everybody who put a card is going to be called. Joe, you're next, and then we have Hamad Khan. Come on. We have, then we have Arnold Sachs, and Arnold Sachs. But we got you down for 2 and 10, if you want to come up as well, Arnold, on that one. So we have Joe, Ahmed, and Arnold Sachs. Is there anybody else who meant to fill out a card and didn't? Okay, so then we'll start with you, Joe.
Okay, my name is Joe Linton. I'm the co-chair of the Green LA Transportation Work Group. We're a coalition of environmentalists and environmental justice advocates. And I just wanted to say that the taxi system can be a really important leg as a transportation alternative to fashion a more environmental, balanced transportation system in Los Angeles. This is a huge opportunity, and it's frankly astonishing to the lack of transparency and the lack of following the council's directives, and we would just urge you to really make this process count and to rescind this contract. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Ahmed Khan I'm the Executive Director of South Asian Network and one of the founding members and organizing committee of the Los Angeles Taxi Workers Alliance. I may go up just for a few seconds, so I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, council members, for your leadership. Just a quick snapshot, when LATWA started in 2004, that's the corruption that we had exposed. Death threats, misappropriation of traveling public's funds, illegal campaign contributions, shredding of financial documents, $2 million in check made payable to cash, opportunities of self-dealing, kickbacks and insurance fraud, violation of tax reporting laws, hundreds of thousands of dollars paid to politicians and lobbyists who tend to also sue the city on their city's own living wage ordinance for the hotel workers. That's also pretty unique about this industry as well. Board election irregularities, conflicts of interest, thousands of dollars spent to sue drivers who exercise First Amendment rights. Just to let you know that they sued South Asian Network, me personally, and LATWA, and spent thousands of dollars, and the suit was dismissed by a superior court. Then a motion got passed in November of last year, which clearly, and you have that in your package, clearly indicated for DOT to come and report back to the council. That was a clear instruction. What you're going to hear from DOT later now is that this is the report that they have put out. And we're really disturbed again that at what point does the leadership take a step back and acknowledge that mistakes have been made. Finally, this is in LA Time, 18th August, when 150 taxi cabs surrounded at City Hall, and the mayor's office came back and said administrative errors were made, it'll go back to the city council. Well, let me count that. The deputy mayor made an administrative error, the city attorney made an administrative error, Mr. Sadati made an administrative error. This seems to be more of an erroneous administration than any administrative error. Now, then they go on to say now in their report, and the spin being that public participation took place. Well, yes, up to a certain point, up until November, and that's a chronology that we have laid out, that public participated in the scope of work. After then, nothing. We come and find out on May 6th, taxi cab commission meeting, that the commission has no authority, and Mr. Sadati and those are all the quotes, and we'll send the tapes, these are all from the taxi cab commission meeting, repeatedly says, this is going to go to the transportation committee, this is going to go to the transportation committee, this is going to go to the city council, let yourself be heard over there. Nothing. Okay? And then when you look at the scope of work itself, why do they need to spend city's dollars to find out how much staff LADOT needs? And look at the scope of work. That's the hard-earned revenues that are going. And when we talk to them about the taxpayers' money, they're not taxpayers' money. They're Prop C money. There's this money. That is still the revenues coming from the public. So, council, please, you've heard the taxi drivers. You've heard from our allies. You've heard from the community. Too many wrongs would never make a right. They always make a wrong. You cannot have the same consultant review their own work that gave this franchise slavery system. You cannot have the same consultant do the work when they have ties to the Rouse family. The Rouse family, which has been called out publicly, openly, that they are the bane, they are the reason why the drivers continue to suffer. So we would really urge you, we appeal to your good sense, for your progressive leadership, that please, let's have a clean slate, let's look at the RFP, let's look at the scope of work, and let's really create a 21st century green taxi system, which really highlights this unique point-to-point, where you get picked up from a desired location, you get taken to a desired location, how it links up with the metro, how it links up with the buses, how it links up with our low-wage community members, and how it really creates a new system, and at the end, the driver's equity, people who give this service. So we really urge you to rescind this contract on this historic day. Thank you very much.
Besides Mr. Sachs, I just got another card from William Rouse. Sachs, you're up.
Just to be clear on this, items 2 and 10 are a little different. That's why I put cards in on both of them.
Go for it.
There was a taxi cab commission meeting, I believe it was like over a year and a half ago, and I brought this up at this meeting. There was an IRS case. One of the drivers supposedly brought to the attention of the IRS questions regarding their status as a subcontractor or driver and the IRS ruled in this case, because they got no response from the cab company, that the driver indeed was an employee of the cab company. Why hasn't LADOT acted on that? Why hasn't this committee acted on that? Are you normally, is that your status to just disregard IRS rulings? I'm not saying it was, I don't know, it's a court case. The papers was just submitted to the Taxi Cab Commission. Why was no follow-up done on it? As far as having some of the information here, you have a list of stuff that's gone here, what these people expect if they have 100 ailments, what do they expect to have some change in this city government that's going to all of a sudden become open and transparent? And some of the people that here at UCLA, some of the same people that backed the living wage ordinance, which is one of the dumbest pieces of legislation ever come around. Give people $1.25 so that they can lose their health benefits. What kind of logic is that? But regarding what to look at, again, legal business licenses, are they up to date? Have they looked at communities in the area? Again, ownership of the vehicle seal. When there was a case where a driver lost his driver's permit because he was in a vehicle picked up in a task force.
Wrap it up.
The driver had the owner's picture as the identity card. The driver got his license taken away. What happened to the owner? Was the owner punished? And if the owner wasn't punished, why not? And if the owner was punished, what happened to that seal? Does it revert back to the company? What's the status on all this stuff?
Thank you, Mr. Sachs.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. William Rouse.
Yes, honorable members of the council, William Rouse, United Checker Cab and LA Yellow Cab General Manager. Council members, Mr. Khan's tactics, disgusting tactics, have reached an all-time low. In August, he was on KBC Talk Radio making absolutely false, unfounded, and outrageous allegations that my family has ties to Vegas crime families and other sort of fantastic allegations. My family's record and our company's record of providing transportation to this city for 72 years, that's 72 years, it speaks for itself. Our owners stand behind the management of our company. Our company provides excellent service to this city and has always done so. Our drivers back us. What is going on here in terms of Mr. Khan's escalation of his attacks on me personally and his escalation of his personal attacks on the city staff have no place in a policy discussion concerning taxi cabs. Mr. Khan should be ashamed of himself, and he should stop. There is no place for that kind of stuff going on in this discussion. And so I'll put our 72-year track record on the line. Anybody else can measure against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Martin?
Martin Shatakian, President, San Gabriel Transit City Cab.
Sorry, folks. Let him speak.
Martin Shatakian, President, San Gabriel Transit City Cab. I have to ask this honorable council to pay attention that evaluation process for selecting Nissan and Nygaard was done properly and officially, and it was transparent. And I don't see personally anything wrong with LADOT staff making a decision to grant the contract to Nissan and Nygaard. And if LATWA members and the organizers are not willing to take in consideration the opinion which is based on official evaluation, the opinion of LADOT staff and the opinion of our city mayor to grant the contract to Nissan and Nygaard, well, that's a problem. And what I propose here, or for once and for all, what we can do, I have to inform you that the Los Angeles taxi cab industry has over 4,000 licensed taxi cab drivers in the city of Los Angeles, and once and for all, what we can do, this is kind of a proposal, what we can do once and for all. Why don't we do two referendums here? One, do the referendum on all Los Angeles licensed taxi cab drivers to see how many of them are supporting LATWA or members of LATWA. And two, second referendum is going to be to see, give me a second, I just want to put this together correctly. And second referendum to see if how many of these 4,000 plus drivers are willing to agree with the LADOT staff and city mayor's decision to grant the contract to Nelson and Nygaard. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else who didn't fill out a card or filled it out and I just didn't get it? No. Okay, could we ask city staff, did you speak before? You did.
Yes, I did, but I would really appreciate to make it very beautiful.
No, can't, it's okay. I'm sorry. Come on up, city staff. Tell us, you've heard a whole lot of different comments here, and I'd like to get, the straight skinny. Maybe you turn a little bit so everybody can see you, so we can get a little discussion going here. Introduce yourself and respond to what we've just heard. And what do we have before us?
Rita Robinson, LADOT General Manager.
Amir Sadati, Assistant General Manager.
I totally get that this is a very emotional situation and one that is highly charged between the companies and the drivers. So, in LADOT's role in this, working with the Taxi Commission, was to attempt to address many of the issues that we know are going to be coming forth with the new process the city has, whether it's franchises or other procedures, beginning next December, not this December, but December 2010. So our attempt was to try to get ahead of the issues because we knew so many issues existed. Many of the things you heard today health benefits, workers' comps, wages, transparency of the companies, auditing. All of those things were taken in consideration at the commission level to try to do a comprehensive study of those issues with regard to a study that couldn't be undertaken by staff, but we wanted to contract out to get some response to those in order to give all of you some of the information you would need in order to make an informed decision as to how the city goes forth in the future. Included in that were also issues regarding some things that we are concerned about too, bandit cab issues, green taxis. All of those things were discussed with, and the UCLA study, were also things that came to the commission's level and to the committee's level with regard to how we proceed with this study. The study is a $250,000 contract that we figured would take about 18 months to do this kind of work in conjunction with the number of stakeholders that we thought would have to be brought into the process. Now, as we begin to march along with, and also knowing that furloughs and other things that were approaching the city that we knew were being threatened to the city, we realized we probably have less staff resources to pursue this more. So we tried to start very early in the process having this discussion so we wouldn't be caught with having to extend the franchises at the end of the day. That was our intention. The department has no reason to have any kind of connection with the companies, any kind of connections with LATWA, any kind of connections of anything except trying to bring you the information that you would possibly need or questions you might possibly want asked about how we proceed in the future. Whether we went with medallions or franchises, some hybrid of that, green taxis, we wanted some of these issues to at least have the information for you. Part of that discussion took place with the commission. Many of these issues were vetted. We went back and forth with the scope of work over many meetings. We went forward and back even with with the Transportation Committee at the time, under former leadership, with regard to those issues that we thought were important for the committee to vet. So you had a stab at the scope of work as well. So we had pretty much resolved the scope of work. When we went into the RFP process with that scope of work, there were 3 bidders, Nielsen Nygaard among them, one firm in Boston, and I can't remember where the other individual was from. But as the staff, as the DOT staff, and we've done millions of RFPs, gone through the process, looked at the rating of those people, how did they fit the city contracting guidelines, Nielsen Nygaard came up at the top of that. There were no other bidders that came into the fold for this. We had it out for quite a while. We followed the procedure for RFP processes. Nobody brought us new people to come through. And so what we did was we wanted to bring it back to committee. At the time, the chair of the committee did not want to bring the item to committee, but we also knew we were losing time.
When was that brought before the committee, or you wanted to bring it?
In May of last year.
In May of last year,
Right.
but the then chair...
Well, even before May, we wanted to, we had a discussion about bringing it.
But it was held, and now...
It was held. And so what we wanted to do was not lose any more time, because as you get closer and closer to next year, we wanted to give you enough time by the summer of next year to begin the discussion of what kind of process do you want to put in place with regard to this issue. I will be the first person to admit there was no collusion with Tom, Amir, myself, or anybody else to say we are locked arm with this contractor or anybody else. I mean, we didn't just pick this person out, this guy. We followed legal procedures of the city. We elected to go to the mayor for the approval of the contract because we were losing so much time at that point in order to move forward with the study. The study is extensive. If you look at the scope of work, there's a lot of things that we're asking a contractor to do in a pretty compressed period of time in order to get back to you with the information you need. I have said from the beginning to the mayor's office, to anybody who asks me, if it is in fact that our attempt to move forward with this in order to give you the information you need does now not sit well with either the process, the outcome, or the contractor that was selected, we can go back to square one. The world will not come to an end. The world will not come to an end if we say, you know what? Take the contract, it has a 30-day clause. The 30-day clause can say, either party can say they don't like the contract. They can walk away, we can walk away, pay them for the services they've rendered. We can start all over again. The only problem with that process, and it's not a problem if it's not a problem for you, not a problem for the staff or myself, is the fact that we will take the remainder of the money that we have, we'll either have to reduce the scope of work to fit that amount of money, or we can go back and say, or we can extend the amount of time in the franchise if they can't get it all done within that time period, to get the RFP out, back, and vet it. And we can say, for as long as we don't have a decision, you can extend the franchises month to month, like we do a lease or a contract. You can extend it as long as you want.
Do you guys want to add anything? And then I want our city attorney and then my colleagues' comments. Did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. I'll just answer some questions
Okay,
later.
how about you?
No, not this time.
Did you want to say anything?
No, I think Mrs. Robinson really described the options that are open to the city. We believe that the currently executed contract is a legal contract, but because there is a 30-day termination clause, the city does retain the discretion, as does the contractor, to exercise that termination clause, and the consequences of doing so, I think, were very well described by the general manager. This city retains the option to renew on a temporary basis the current franchise terms and conditions, but they will be on the current franchise terms and conditions until you set up a new regulatory framework or make a decision to renew for a 10-year period of time the current terms and conditions.
Okay, Mr. Koretz first, and then Mr. Alicon, and then Mr. Parks.
Well, I have significant questions about the process. And of course, the process, I'm backing into the process because I wasn't here during it. I was maybe in a tiny bit watching it from a distance, but not very closely. But reading from what the process, how the process was laid out, it's one sentence in the development of the 2000 taxi cab refranchising plan on page 14, section 8, contractor selection. Staff's recommendations shall be presented to the general manager of DOT, the board of taxi cab commissioners, and ultimately city and mayor for approval. So it was clear, a nice transparent system was laid out. The general manager approves it, the board of taxi cab commissioners discusses and approves a recommendation. The city, that's not clear whether it would just be the council or the transportation committee first and then the council and ultimately the mayor. Now, as I understand it in the charter, it's basically the mayor. But so ultimately, I think at the end of the day, the mayor could have overruled the decision, picked somebody else, but at least there would have been a clear, more transparent process. And I've been told we bypassed that process that we set up here because of time. I've been told that we bypassed it because of the charter. The charter says the mayor can do it, so we laid it out and then ignored it. How exactly is that? And how do we deal with that for this situation? But how do we lay out for the future that we want a more transparent process? And in the future, we would actually like it to look like this. And even if ultimately it's still the mayor's decision and we haven't made a charter change, we still have a process where you have public hearings, everyone has their say, everyone gets their input along the way appropriately, and then you make a decision. Clearly not here. So how did we lay this out and then not do it? And exactly why did we lay it out this way and then not do it?
Is there somebody from the mayor's office here? Okay. Mr. Robinson, you want to respond to Mr. Koretz?
Well, we did lay it out, Mr. Koretz, and we did follow a procedure. We didn't follow that procedure. We tried to bring it back to committee. We couldn't get it agendized. So that would be one way. I mean, I can't agendize
But before that, the
myself.
taxi cab commissioners, they didn't have a vote of approval. They didn't have a public hearing
We
and
took
a
it to the
vote.
commission for instruction. We let them know let them know what the selection was because we really thought we were going to bring it to committee. I really thought we were going to bring it to committee. That was my desire.
But they didn't vote an approval as laid out here, though.
No, they did not approve.
No,
So-
and Councilmember Koretz, if I may add just to Ms. Robinson's comments, as we started, this was truly back in 2008, almost a year and a half ago. So your statement is correct, as the department wanted to make sure that we were inclusive and included all the stakeholders. As this process moved forward and we were moving towards the Board of Taxi Commissioners, we were advised by the LA Administrative Code and the Charter and the Mayor's Executive that the role of a commission is advisory in the procurement of contract process. That's not a power that a city commission has in approving or participating in a contract approval. That was the advice that we were given by the city attorney as well as the mayor's office. So that is a separate issue. I think there's a few different issues, and I just want to lay out, there's the process, there's the board's role, then there's the whole council and coming back to council. But that's why the Board of Taxi Commissioners were informed, were advised, were very engaged in the scope of work, and we took all of their amendments, their comments, as well as the public, input it and brought it back to the Transportation Committee, where this body then amended the scope of work. So all of the issues regarding medallions, regarding workers' conditions, regarding transparency, it is, and I can go chapter by chapter and let you know where those things are, in that, but I'm not going to take that time, but it is included.
Here, can I put you on hold for a second, because Mr. Parks has to go to another committee meeting,
Sure.
so I'd like to let Mr. Parks get in.
Thank you. Let me just make a comment so I can go and come back. Having lived through this during the process, and I think the reason that the whole issue of the study came about is that we had all of these hearings in which no one could make heads or tails out of whether the UCLA study was good, bad, or indifferent. We had as many cab drivers that came in and said the $8 or $9 an hour, or whatever the figure was not accurate. We had people coming in saying they were destitute and they couldn't eat, and it went from one extreme to the other. And so the whole purpose of the study was to say, let's clear the air, let's get someone independent. And we did bring it back, and we gave some new clarity as to the scope. And the issue, and this is the first I heard, that we couldn't get it scheduled at the committee. And if you couldn't get it scheduled at committee, then there's not a lot of alternatives you have. And the other issue was, we've been putting pressure on you as a department not to allow RFPs to lapse, just like we had on one of the items earlier, and not to go to month if it were not absolutely necessary. And with all of these issues going on, I think that what I'm most concerned with is that not so much whether every step of the process was followed, but did we come up with the legitimate answer to the question? Is it from the staff's perspective that we had the best person or organization to do the study? And now the concern I have is that even if they complete the study, we still have people at odds. And I'm just wondering whether we'll ever resolve this issue to where there's some agreement that this is the way we should go, because we're going to have people that are so far apart that they'll never come to the middle ground. And again, the study, I thought when we left, whatever that period of time, the study was going to clean the air up. We'd have some objective view. There are people that believe that the people that were selected basically is less objective because they will just perpetuate what they originally created. There are those that believe that that organization is the best able to do it because they know more about it. And so we have that diversity of thought. And again, as far as not being able to get a schedule and having no other options, and we also know, having said on this committee, that there are many times in which getting direct information or direction from the mayor's office has turned things in a different direction than the committee has given you direction to do. And so I understand that whole issue of having a whole lot of masters and trying to basically satisfy them, but I just don't know whether and how we can get to the point that there's consensus as to the direction that the department is taking, because there are people that are so at odds and it's so emotional, and there's so much water under the bridge that I don't know if we get to a common ground of objectivity. But having sat through all those hearings and all those people came up, and when we got finished, the committee looked at each other and said, we can't make heads or tails out of what everybody said, because for every comment for pro, there was one for con, and there was back and forth. And then people discredited the UCLA study. Other people held it up like it was the Bill of Rights. And we still don't know which one it is. And now we're back to spending $250,000, and at the end of the day, I don't know whether anybody, depending on what it says, that anybody will find that it's credible until it's back to step one, and that's what my concern is. And again, to hear that we didn't get it scheduled because we'd been putting all that pressure on you to get it done, not to lapse. Let's get moving on this. Let's get this report at hand before you go out for the new franchises or whatever we call it. That was the game plan. And it's kind of like meters. We gave a game plan, then we found out meters got sidetracked. I mean, so the issue I think that's important, and the lesson I see here is that when the committee gives a direction, there's got to be some way that we get information if you're taken off track. Otherwise, we sit here thinking you're going down lane one, and we found out through other sources you're on lane two, not by your own desire, but by the fact that you're given different direction. And if the committee doesn't know that, we're traveling under the original concept. Don't let it go to lapse. Get the objective report, get it before the franchises go out again or whatever we call them. And that's what I left that impression. And then to hear very recently that we have a situation where people are, doubting the process, don't like the contractor, and all of those things, again, I just don't know how we're ever going to resolve it, because I just don't know if the people that are here the most and show up at these meetings, I don't know how many people they speak for, but they certainly have the ability to fill up the room. And when it's all said and done, I don't know how much of what gets said is for the larger good of the city's operation as opposed to the personal interests of those who show up. So I'm going to personnel, and I'll be back.
I appreciate, Mr. Parks, your candor on that and your insight into the process. Mr. Alarcon.
Yeah, first of all, I have a number of questions. In your staff report, it says DOT acknowledges some administrative disconnect. What exactly is an administrative disconnect?
Is that miscommunications between the fact we did not ask these questions in a vacuum. We asked the CLA and the CAO and the city attorney with regard to, if we can't get it scheduled on committee, but we need to get this thing moving, what's the next thing we can do? And it was.
What is the administrative disconnect?
The administrative disconnect is the fact that we had one thing in the RFP with regard to the commission that we did not follow. And so we did not get the.
Well, that's where it said the shall go to the committee. So you're saying that, because you were not able to uphold that promise, that's an administrative disconnect?
Well, we tried to get it on the committee, but.
No, I'm asking, is that what you're saying is the administrative disconnect? Okay. How did you communicate to the committee that you wanted to schedule it?
Verbally requested.
We
schedule the committee.
Who did the verbal request go to?
We usually do that in our agenda setting and our.
So that went to who?
The chair. With
to
the chair at the time.
So the chair, did the chair say, it wasn't Mr. Rosendahl, it was before that. So did Ms. Gruhl say she didn't want to have the meeting, or she didn't want to agendize it, or?
Just didn't want this issue agendized at the time, so, and that's why we were losing time. So at the time.
And we're talking about what length of process? What length of time?
Pardon?
Your first request to have this matter scheduled was?
It was
June.
May or June?
May or June.
May or June?
June 19th, council member, is when we had the.
June 19th?
Yeah, telephone conversation with the task force and verbally asked about the agendizing the subject.
Okay, so June 19th. Because in your comments, you made it sound like it was a year ago or something.
Well, we had been discussing it up to then because, not a year ago. We started the process.
The request to schedule it for the committee was June 19th.
There were discussions, but as written in our report, that's where the official discussion took place with the agenda-setting members of the
June 19th of this year, not last year.
Yes, just a few months ago, whatever it was, June 19th.
And the committee chair, 2 weeks later, was controller. Did you resubmit a request to reschedule with the new chair?
No, we did not.
Did you approach the vice chair?
Oh, No, we usually work with the chair.
Well, but there was no chair, because the chair was city controller. So there was no chair for...
No, we did not ask.
How long, when did you start as chair?
I was
September.
the vice chair, and I absolutely had nothing to do with vice.
I asked the question again. Did you request of the vice chair at the time to reschedule the meeting?
My bad.
No, we did not.
Okay, so your request to agendize this was from a period of June 19th to June 30th? Because there was no reason for the vice chair to know that you wanted this thing scheduled.
In addition, council member...
Is that correct? It's a yes or no question?
Yes.
Okay, so you're suggesting that this administrative disconnect, that because the chair from last year, from the time period of June 19th to June 30th, when she was in that position, did not want to schedule this, for whatever reasons, that gave you sufficient reason to go directly to the mayor with this contract and skirt the promise in the process that said you shall go to the committee? At what point did you make the decision to go to the mayor?
At that same conversation, we were advised, council member, that...
Which conversation?
This conversation with the agenda-setting members.
On June 19th.
And also prior to that, there was additional conversation that this was not under the purview of the council. This contracting under the, and I have it in our report, that this contract being under 3 years, having to do with a certain dollar amount, was something that the mayor could sign off on. And that was, again,
Okay,
written from the CAO report.
Wait a minute.
And
But your own proposal, your own RFP says shall go to this committee.
I understand.
So again, at what point did you change the process?
Well, we didn't change the process, as both...
No, you did
general
change the
manager
process.
and-
You didn't go to the committee, you went directly to the mayor. You changed the process. At what point did you make that decision?
All I could tell you is, Councilmember, on when we discussed this...
No, I'm asking for an answer to that question. At what point did you make the decision to change the process, to not have the council consider it, and to go directly to the mayor? When was that decision made?
After we spoke with the incumbent chair of Transportation Committee, and were advised that this is not going to be agendized, so...
Incumbent chair.
The
After
prior
June
chair.
19th.
Pardon me?
After June 19th.
June 19th, after June 19th.
The incumbent chair,
The past chair of the Transportation Committee.
past chair.
Yes.
So
She was still chair at...
you didn't
June
even
19th.
you didn't even consider waiting for the new chair. You didn't even consider waiting for the vice chair's opinion. You didn't even consult with the vice chair.
But let me just say, as a vice chair, let me just say...
No, Tom, please.
All right.
I just want them to answer the questions. You didn't even go to the vice chair.
No, we did not.
You know, what Mr. Parks was speaking of was essentially trust. Building a trust. If you violate the trust, then the spirit in which the substance of the matter is being conducted is undermined. This contract is bogus at this point. Regardless. And wait. This is not an issue of whether all the considerations. I don't even know. I haven't even looked at the considerations. I haven't even read the report about the considerations, because the only thing I want to know is whether we kept our promise to the people that were involved in the RFP process. And the bottom line is we did not, because we did not give them the opportunity to present their case to the city council. And you promised them that you would. At no time did you go to the public and to the parties involved in the RFP and say, oh, we can't get this considered by city council. Do you mind if we skip over that and go to the mayor? You never asked them. So I would move that this contract be rescinded and...
We're all living and learning at the same time here in this room.
I'll second that for now, at least for discussion.
Let Mr. Koretz finish his points, and then Mr. Labange is going to speak.
Now, one thing I want to clarify, this motion may not mean anything, because at the end of the day, the mayor, just like our staff has the ability just to decide to ignore us and pass this contract anyway, because it fits under, as my understanding of the charter, what the mayor can do. So the question is, do you have to pay any attention to us if the council votes that? Do you go ahead and hand it to the mayor and do the contract anyway? How does this work?
Mr. Koretz, if we can have some consensus here among the committee members, I mean, I don't think that at this point, if the committee members would like for us to go back to square one and give us the instructions on how they want to conduct this and get and take an action in that matter, we can march in that direction. But we just also want to make sure that we get a chance to tell you exactly what that means at the end of the day. If there's, I mean, we estimate that perhaps out of the $250,000, that probably $35,000 to $40,000 has been spent. So you end up with about $210,000 or about $200,000. You can look at the scope of work and determine which of those things you feel are still important to look at. If we can reduce the scope of work to really focus in on those issues that appear to be the most important to you in order to determine what kind of process we have in 2010, then we perhaps could move forward with regard to making sure we get you that information specifically by the time you need to make that decision in the summer. If we keep expanding it, then it may take you may have to take an action to continue the franchises until such time as you get there. So, I'm willing to march left or right, depending on what instructions how many hoops you want this to go through before it gets back to you.
Well, we're in a difficult position. I mean, I've heard things on both sides. I haven't made a judgment on the issues themselves yet, although I'm certainly concerned about the things that we've heard about, things that folks face in the industry. I recognize we're in a difficult position because the folks that have been chosen for the contract are the most familiar with the issues. They can hit the ground running. At the same time, they're the ones that appear to have established the process that we're trying to look at reforming. So they may be more tied to the process. And we've expended some money, which isn't short supply. And we're going to have a shorter staffed department. So those are all considerations. I mean, I'm inclined, partly because I ran for this office, with a look at how do we bring more transparency to City Hall? How do we change the impression that everything is done with a backroom deal? And this feels like that to me. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think staff has a dog in this fight. I think you're just trying to solve it the same way we are. But the process doesn't feel right. And I'm inclined in the same direction as my colleague, Mr. Alarcon, to say it's not ideal. We're wasting a little city money. We're setting ourselves back in time. We're doing it with our eyes open, but I think we need to send a message. We need a clearer, cleaner process, and so people won't be thinking, okay, we picked the fox to guard the hen house, that we really gave adequate thought and adequate transparency. And with a look towards a slightly similar issue, how we pick a new chief of police, I did an item at council asking the police commission and police leadership to lay out what the process would be. And they said, we're doing some neighborhood council meetings, we're going to commission, we're doing all these transparent steps. And I did that partly to make sure that sometimes we've picked a chief without doing all those transparent steps. So I think we need to see a new day, and we need to see a more open process. And I think I, for one, will opt for the most open process.
Mr. Labange.
I apologize, Mr. Rosendahl. I was at the senior center in my district. I hadn't been able to be there. I apologize and give me an update, so I didn't hear all that was done. But I also know the department is anxious in trying to do the right thing, whatever the right thing is. And as the general manager said, whatever the committee wants, that's what you'll do. There's a time price to pay. But I think as others expressed, and I know staff had briefed me earlier, transparency is the biggest key in anything. And I respect the mayor. There is a changed charter. It is a different world. But the reality is, you still got to come to committee. There was a gap, though, unfortunately, as the former chair, who did an excellent job, did move to another city job as our city controller in a very respectful way, that there probably should have been some connection. And I don't know if it came, Maria, was there any opportunity to schedule this earlier?
There was no report submitted.
Yeah, so on that situation, I think in the interest of everybody, and I don't want anybody to clap, but I think we should follow what has been discussed on the issue, but come back on a timely fashion, because I think this industry is an important component to the transportation. And when I spoke to the seniors, I spoke about Ernie, the taxi driver, in It's a Wonderful Life, and how important it is to have that person in a community who delivers every day and has that relationship with the people. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Let me just make a few comments. As you could see, I'm speaking last. Maybe the tradition of this committee has been whatever, but the tradition today is there are 5 of us, and so there are 5 of us who can speak and interact with whatever they hear. There's no plan when I walk into the room to do anything other than what's best for the people of the city. So we'll just start with that as a backdrop. My concern is the concern that Mr. Alarcon mentioned about trust. It's all about trust. This whole government is about trust. As Mr. Koretz mentioned, when he ran for office, I ran on the same platform of transparency and openness, and government, to me, has to reflect the people and has to bring the people into the process. I feel bad for city staff. The reason I feel bad for city staff is because they want to go forward and get this issue resolved, and the scope of work covers a lot of the areas that everybody in the room would 100% agree need to be covered. So that part I appreciate. I also want to say, for the record, any old motions that have been floating around in this committee prior to my chair, I want them all brought to the surface, and I want all my colleagues and I to vet them, and we're either going to move forward with these various motions or not move forward with these various motions. And just for the record, I didn't know anything about this until a briefing yesterday afternoon that I was brought into the loop on it. And so as we went through the process today, I'm concerned about staff and their morale and their positioning on this issue. But since Ms. Robinson made it clear that we could move forward with nothing at this point, but I don't want to go back to square one in the sense of time frame and be another 18 months to 2 years before we do anything. We need to move quickly. So if we going to rescind this, I want to direct DOT to report back with a revised scope of work as quickly as you can, and I would like to ask DOT how long it will take to report back with the revised scope, and what process will we do to bring the people in the room here into a perception becomes reality sense that they believe that, in fact, the process has been transparent and open. I don't want to talk about it a year from now. I want to talk about this in a more timely manner. And if there is, again, I'll ask, anybody from the mayor's office here? Since the mayor's office played a role in this, I sort of thought by speaking over the mic that would have given them enough time to either show up or what. So I have no idea their attitude, their position of why they did what they did and why the committee and this process that we all knew about should take place. So, Ms. Robinson, what kind of response can you say? Would we be a month to month under the present situation? And how long of a time frame do you see? And how can we include people in the room here to be part of that?
Well, first of all, the people in the room were involved at the commission level with the scope of work. So as long as we can determine they were involved with the scope of work, and then it went through the commission, and they spoke very clear and loud at the commission and at the committee. Yeah. So both of those things have gone through. If there are revisions in the scope of work that they now want to revise, then those are things they should bring forth to us so that we'll be aware of what that is. because they were
How about
involved,
picking
they were
of the
involved
group?
with the amendment,
That sounds good.
from the beginning with the scope of work.
Okay, what
And that
about
was
picking of
vetted
the
through the
group?
commission. And so if you want that vetted through the commission again, then you can, or do you just want it to come to committee? Those
I
are-
would like to bring it to committee. We have the groups here in the room here.
With the approval or review of the commission or not?
Well, the commission is appointed to do these kinds of things, so might as well bring them into that part of the process.
So we'll allow for the public or those from Lotwa and other places to look at the scope of work again, to bring us a written idea, because what we can't continue to do is we have something in writing, then they'll say there's something else. But if they can bring something.
Give me a time
that
frame
gives
that
us
works
an
for you,
idea.
to make it the 90 days from now, the whole thing wrapped up,
90, in terms of the scope of work and.
in terms of the council committee here voting on it.
I would say that would give, voting on what now? I want to be sure.
We're going to vote on what you've processed, and if there's an opportunity for us to have a role in who we pick, or who the candidates are, all of that process.
Yeah, I think we just need a little bit better clarification, Councilmember. The scope of work, I believe in, that wasn't really the issue, because this, I can read it for you. The first item,
Yeah.
the contractor must review and discuss the findings from the UCLA study. Must. There is a big issue on workers' conditions and health. There's transparency. There's auditing.
Sure.
So the work, I don't think the scope is the issue, to be honest with you.
I
A
agree.
lot of that is in there. So if you want to take the time, we can go back to the commission with if you have anything you can give us as far as additional input, we'll take your input to the commission, have a public meeting, say that the Transportation Committee has asked for a revised scope of work, but I think what you need to be clear, are you today rescinding this contract or not?
If we have the power to rescind the contract now, then I would rescind it.
Well, I would turn to our city attorney, because there's a 30-day clause, so we have to make sure it takes 30 days to give notice, if that's the direction you're going. Then to start the process, you are back at square one, because now a revised scope needs to be prepared. RFPs have to be then processed and put out. People have to respond to them. You know, that is a process that, as Councilmember Koretz mentioned, we're losing staff, so.
Go ahead.
Under the contract, it is the City of Los Angeles that has the discretion, generally exercised through the general manager of the department, to exercise not a rescission, but a 30-day termination clause for the contract. And it's an interesting question as to whether or not direction from a particular council committee is sufficient direction to the general manager to accomplish the exercise of that 30-day clause. Certainly you can request it, and at least I heard that the general manager was quite responsive to hearing and taking into consideration the direction or request of this committee.
And we have a motion already on the table. Would you repeat that motion?
The motion was specifically to rescind the contract, but I think technically what the appropriate action would be for this committee to request the general manager to rescind the contract, and we could pass that instruction onto the city council that could also direct it as a whole. But so I think that technically would be the appropriate way to do it.
Would you like to
And again, just because the language of the contract is that each party maintains the right to terminate with a 30-day rather than using the word rescission, which has a different legal characteristic, I would suggest that the motion be to request the general manager to exercise the 30-day termination clause.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
You're prescient.
Do we have a second on that?
That's exactly what I intended to second.
Okay. All those in favor of that signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? It's unanimous.
And the second thing.
Now you've heard the committee's comments. the bigger question becomes, where do we go from here, and what can we do from here to expedite this process?
Well, the second thing is if there are any revisions that are requested by the committee or the public regarding the scope of work, we need to know what that is. If they want to read through it and cross it out and add in it, whatever it is, they need to submit those comments to us so that we know what those are and we can submit those to the commission. But the second thing is also if they have any recommendations on other vendors that can do this work, because you only had 3 players before. One was from Boston and one didn't have any experience at all. That's going to play a key role in who can get you the information and who can actually vet this process and give you what you need in the end. So if they have any recommendations on who those people are and where they can be found, then that would be helpful too.
What mechanism would you like to use to have that information
They
given
can
to you?
transmit that to the taxi commission if they feel more comfortable than dealing with staff, then they can transmit that information.
Okay, here's what I'd like you to do, is submit it to the commission and to you over the next 2 weeks, okay? 2-week period from today. And then schedule at the next available commission meeting this topic to be discussed there. Urge the public to attend. Take it through that process, okay? When the commission has acted, and I want them to act at their next...
October 14th is their next scheduled meeting.
So between now and October 14th, get all that in, let them act on it then, get them to agendize it, then bring it back, if my colleagues agree with that, to this committee 2 weeks later, so that we can take action. So by the 1st of November would be my goal. We would be sitting here making a decision.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, does that make sense? Can we put that out there that way?
Yeah.
Covered, okay. So we're basically looking at, Mr. Trelisi, in a second, today is the 23rd?
23rd.
Okay, so we're talking a little over a month that we could have this whole issue properly processed and going forward. Thank you, Mr.
2 possibilities that I wanted to put forward. One is we could wind up with the same vendor also. It's not an impossibility that they might wind up being still the most qualified and obvious vendor. So if that happens, people should be aware that that's not an impossibility. Another possibility that I haven't heard considered is this could also be done in-house. And I don't know why that wasn't considered except for a possible lack of on-point expertise. I don't know.
Well, we are losing staff, and we have lost all our vacancies through the budget and through the operational plan. There's another 12% slated for removal. So in addition, as I think Councilmember Alarcon mentioned, there's an independent study. This whole process is for an independent third party to go with all the different stakeholders, bring all that information, use their expertise in the nation to see what is the best method, give you the pros and cons, give you a toolbox, both from a driver's side, from the public side, from a financial revenue side, for you to make decisions on what system would work best, franchising, a hybrid.
Well, here's one thing I would ask. I'd like to ask, if there's no objection, for staff to also consider the possibility of having someone do it in-house and having the money that would have applied to the contract go to keep someone from being laid off. That would be fine. And look at whether the level of independence is any greater in the folks that we're contracting with than with staff. I'd like to at least see that factored in.
And Ms. Robertson, if possible, the second, you said the meeting is the 14th of the commission?
The next commission meeting
When
is
is our
scheduled
next scheduled Transportation Committee meeting that?
October 28th.
Would we be in a position to bring it back on the 28th?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are the dates, the 14th before the commission and the 28th before this committee again. And I urge everybody in the room to gamefully engage yourself in this issue so that we all have the nodding heads we see right now coming back when we meet again on the 28th on this issue. Yes,
Mr. Chair? Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Tom Bischler, Taxi Administrator. You had directed staff to pay attention to the public comments and present some comments in response to that.
Right.
If I may, I did take some notes. I just want to spend a couple of minutes.
I would like that.
First of all, we take any allegations of corruption or malfeasance very seriously, and encourage anyone making such allegations to provide us factual information in writing, dates, times, persons, locations, and complete circumstances of any illegal activity, whether the allegations are against staff or anyone involved in the industry. We will investigate. Lease fees, there's a comment regarding lease fees being expensive, and it's my understanding that lease fees have not changed significantly in 10 years. They've been roughly between $450 to $550 per week for 10 years. So there's not been any dramatic increase in lease fees recently. There have been allegations that the gentleman who's a principal with Nelson Nygaard is like the father of the franchise system in Los Angeles. This is completely ridiculous. The city of Los Angeles has had franchise taxicab system in one variation or another since the 1920s. What we did in the year 2000, he was a participant with a different contractor, Hara and Associates. What we did in 2000 was we refranchised. We had different companies that were on different timetables in terms of their permits to operate and different circumstances. So we came up with uniform ways, or uniform franchise for all the companies that got franchised in that year. The reason that the city has had franchises for all these years is that the city, the powers that be, your predecessors, have found that a franchise system is responsive to the needs of consumers. It is very effective in putting pressure on the taxi cab companies to serve all areas of the city. And we have found through our evaluations that the existing companies have done an effective job of that, and year after year, they have been renewed with their franchises. Medallion systems have lease drivers also. The City of New York is a very active Taxi Workers Alliance, and it's my understanding that none of them are fans of medallion systems. So I would say anyone who thinks that medallions are going to be a panacea for drivers, to be careful what you wish for. Of course, there's many ways that you can go with between permits and franchises, medallions, and that is something that the contractor was instructed to come up with a list of alternatives for.
It would sound sensible to have all those options for all of us to begin with.
Yes.
Right. We investigated, did not find a conflict of interest between the principal, no need to mention his name, and who worked for Nelson Nygaard. That company had a small, like, on-call kind of contract with the Taxi Limousine and Paratransit Association, the purpose of which was to act as a liaison with user groups such as the disabled communities in different areas of the country, so that they could put them in touch with the transportation companies to develop more effective programs. Nelson Nygaard was actually, they were never called on to perform any of that contract. So we didn't see any conflict of interest in that regard. Let's see. Well, I think that just about covers the main points that were made in the public comment section. So I just wanted to clarify some of those things.
Appreciate that very much.
And did you get the correction? I apologize.
Yes,
the October
15th.
15th is the Thursday, is the next
The next
taxi board.
commission meeting is...
There was a meeting scheduled for October 1st. Unfortunately, due to a lack of quorum, they had to cancel that meeting. So now the next meeting would be 2 weeks after that.
Next board meeting is on Thursday, October the 15th, to clarify the record. I appreciate your comments again, and part of the scope of work is to look at the medallion, look at this, look at that, put it all out there.
Present the range of options, yes.
Sure. Okay, folks, so that's the decision made by the committee, and we'll see you all again dealing it with us here. Okay. I don't think so. What do you want to do? I think we're going to go to the item that we spent 2 hours on this, folks, so we need to move forward. And at this point, Just for the record, Mr. Koretz is leaving because he has to go to the personnel meeting, and I say to my dear friend, Mr. Dennis Zine, not to conflict with our Transportation Committee with his scheduled meetings going forward. So if we could work that out, it's critical that we keep a full committee here to deal with these important issues. Because, as Mr. Koretz is leaving, we have a very significant issue to talk about, and I'd like to change the agenda part and go to that other issue right now, which has to do with briefing about traffic management services at the Hollywood Bowl, the Greek Theater, Dodger Stadium, Staples Center, LA Live, and Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum in around Exhibition Park. We're dealing with how we go forward under these financial constraints in providing the kinds of services that obviously these venues need. So this is item number 7. Could you repeat item number 7 for the record?
Item number 7 on the regular agenda is the DOT report in response to a Lavange Parks Perry Reyes motion relative to a briefing regarding traffic management services provided at the Hollywood Bowl, Greek Theater, Dodger Stadium, Staples Center, LA Live, and Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum in and around Exposition Park. And DOT has submitted a report today. You should have that in front of you.
Can I have staff come up here right now?
I'm going to hit the restroom. I'll be back.
Don't hit it too hard.
The city attorney advises you not to hit it too hard. That's the city attorney. I know. Okay, good. All right, good. That's the door. I know. That's it. Alan Willis.
Yes, Alan Willis from the Department of Transportation. The report that was submitted today is a follow-up to a report that was submitted for the last meeting of the committee 2 weeks ago, which basically just presented letters that were sent to all of the major venues on July 24th. The report today basically summarizes the discussions and the briefings that we've had with each of those venues and the current status of those negotiations.
Right.
The key thing for us is that, and what we summarize in this report, is the fact that we've explained to all of them that this year the department had $4 million removed from its, or deleted from its special event overtime budget of approximately $6 million. That left us with actually $1.7 million in change for all of the events all year long. What's happened is that as the council has continued to waive fees for various types of special events since July 1st and continues to do so, and as we continue to provide services for these major sports and entertainment venues, through the first 2 months of this year, we had spent $800,000 of that $1.2 million that we have for the entire year. So we're now in a situation where, as of the beginning of September, we only had $400,000 left to last us the remaining 10 months of the year.
Let me ask a question. Was there some discussion with some of these organizations that you would not charge them this year?
What we explained to them is we've been telling them all along that the day was going to come when we would be requiring them to reimburse us for these services. We've told the Dodgers that, we've told Staples Center and LA Live that, but this was actually something that when we saw the budget and we realized that roughly 70% of our overtime budget was gone, and the money we had left was essentially just the money that would pay for things like responding to First Amendment marches and protests where we don't normally get any reimbursement, and also for responding to city-sponsored events. We had hopes that the special event subsidy ordinance would have been passed a lot sooner,
right,
and given us some relief, but it wasn't.
Let me ask you a question. You believe in transit, right?
Yes.
So in the issue of the Hollywood Bowl, they have to use Highland Avenue to park their buses, right? There's no alternative.
Okay.
Right? So
right.
I just have trouble as a representative of the area, because there's a positive that more people probably combined than all venues in Southern California take transit to the Hollywood Bowl, but there's no place to park them. So to walk away from this, and I could understand next year if you have to say, hey, the season's complete, this is next year, you got to deal with it next year. It's a county facility, it's run by the Philharmonic, which is a private not-for-profit. raise your parking, there's 2,900 spaces there, cover the cost that way. This is what my feeling is there, and that's what I'm going to try to convince the committee. The same thing with the Greek Theater. There's a contract that they have that doesn't specify who's responsible for that, and basically the traffic control for the Greek Theater is based on a substandard street that leads to the park that has a tough Y intersection that enters one boulevard, Los Feliz, that access to either the 101 via Vermont or Western or Franklin, or the 5 via Los Feliz. So those are challenges there, and they're just almost at the end of their season right now. I think today's the 23rd of September, and I think they have at the Greek Theater 6 or 7 more events. So this is what I have, because if you walk away from it, you're walking away from what the city provides for the safe issue of a substandard street that doesn't have any street lighting that carries traffic to and fro. So, I could understand, members, that with the new year coming, that they would adjust their parking, which they pay parking tax for, to cover the cost. And I don't know if anyone's here from the Recreation and Parks Department, which they should be here because it's their contract.
Okay.
Rita, I'm going to turn it back to Bill when, because you want to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Labange.
No, Rita came up to say something there.
Mr. Parks has joined us, so there are 4 out of the 5 members, and I apologize for the conflicting committee meetings going on that we're not all 5 here. This is a serious issue. We are running out of money, and we can't continue to provide the services to these venues unless something is done about it. And I'd like just to dovetail with what Mr. Labange said. Rita, could you give us the update on exactly where we are, and Alan, fill it in on the backside? And then I know we have a recommendation potential that you want the committee to make. Please.
Well, I think we're totally in agreement that we don't want to walk away from anything that does not provide health and safety for the residents of the city. But I started this conversation in January of this year and continued it in April when the budget was presented, that if there was $4 million taken from our budget in order to provide these services free of charge, I could not continue the same level of service. So this is no new news to anybody. I started that way, discussing it. The other part I started by saying is that I have a fiduciary responsibility to not work people that I don't have the money to pay. So if I can't pay my staff, I can't really have them out there doing the work. And I was hoping that just the reality check of that conversation would have kind of slowed the waivers that continue to flow through the council. So that's what ate up the money, was the waivers. So that's why we're in the situation we're in now with only $400,000 left to continue through the end of the year, because we have the city-sponsored events and the emergency events and the First Amendment events that we must respond to. And that's all the money that's left. I don't have any money coming into the coffers in order to cover those. Not to mention the fact that I wanted to at least have money available to front payment of my staff, because I'd be in trouble if I didn't pay them on time, even for those venues that wanted to pay me later. So even it's a billing after the fact. So even if I bill them, I have to have money to pay the staff because their paychecks come sooner than I would get accounts receivable from the venues, payable and receivable. We don't want to scare people. That is not my intention. I'm not dramatizing anything or making it sound like, the end of the world. The fact is that unless these venues decide that they could do with a lot less of our work on their end and try to find some way to scale down what we do for them so we can have less staff, and some of them have much less staff and a little bit more congestion because of the fact we don't have as much staff, we can't afford it, and they claim they can't afford it. Neither side can afford it. Then let's come together and see if that we can figure out something to get us through the remainder of this year. I agree with you, Councilmember Labange. We don't want to pull the plug on people in the middle of the process. But as the council directed us to, we did send them letters, and we've tried to work with them to see if there's some way that we can kind of scale down the cost that goes to them and to us in the process of trying to get new agreements or the ordinance in place sometime along the way. So we will continue. I think the one thing this report does is kind of make it real for people so that they don't continue to think that this is not going to happen to them. It is going to happen. We will continue to suffer losses. I mean, you guys spent 2 days, 3 days last week in 24-hour sessions trying to resolve some of the same things we've been trying to resolve that we say are coming. Well, it's here, you know, so we're just trying to let you know that it's here. We'll continue working with them, and it may be a little bit more congestion than people wanted because I just can't afford to send as many officers out because I don't have as many officers that I can afford. But they have to come to terms with eventually, whether it's now or later, they have to pay.
Okay, let me just take that point there, and Mr. Willis, we'll go back to you on this. You have officially notified through letters the Hollywood Bowl, the Greek Theater, Dodger Stadium, Staples Center, LA Live Complex, and Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Is that correct?
Yes, including the sports arena.
Okay, and what is the status of those discussions, and where are we at?
Okay, we've met with all of the representatives of all of those venues except for Dodger Stadium. We've had telephonic conversations with them, and they said that they're definitely willing to work with us about the base deployment and what we provide for free right now, and how we can restructure that and work out some kind of reimbursement. But we haven't actually scheduled a meeting yet.
What about the other venues?
The other venues, we've talked to the Hollywood Bowl, and they were the first group we met with. They have said that that the level of deployment that we have right now, they believe is the minimum that they can live. I mean, they can't live with anything less than that. It's already been scaled back to the absolute minimum, but it's as many as 19 officers on a Hollywood Bowl event day. That's a lot of money. You know, that's probably more like $15,000 a night. In terms of services. They are looking at alternatives like, can we do something where we increase our parking fees and send that money to DOT? Can we divert the parking occupancy tax that we pay to the city's general fund and have that diverted to DOT to pay for our services? But it's everything except, and they
pay for the service.
Yeah, and then they, we said, well, you're a county facility. Why don't you just go to the county supervisor and say, we need to replace all these traffic officers with county sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, and put them out? They can direct traffic in the street. And I mean, it's their cost, it's their facility. But they also argue that the LA Philharmonic is a registered nonprofit, and there's a contractor that operates the Hollywood Bowl. So they said they should be exempt from paying anything.
And then you say back to them, we need the $15,000 for each of the nights.
What we've told them is that when we run out of money, we won't be able to require anybody to work at any event because we can't pay them.
Did you comment on the special events or time and a half?
We come in at time and a half.
I know, I mean, in the committee here.
By contract.
Have you explained that by contract, when you say the word special event?
Yes.
You're paying your people time and a half?
Yes. And we've even explained to them that, in the long run, I said with something like a 99% markup on regular time, where you pay 200% of somebody's salary for full reimbursement, on overtime there's only like a 10% markup, so you pay 165% of somebody's salary. So it's actually cheaper in the long run to pay somebody on time and a half. But they don't think they should have to pay, period.
So them saying they don't think they have to pay, and you told them what is the cutoff point when you will no longer have officers there for the Hollywood Bowl?
Basically, all we could tell them at this time was, unless something changes, we have a council resolution that says we're supposed to provide these services free of charge. We're going to continue to do that until we run out of money, until that process is changed, or that declaration is changed.
When will you run out of money?
We, at the rate we're going, we'll probably run out of it in a week or two.
In a week or two, you won't have the money to provide that service to the Hollywood Bowl.
Correct. Or to anybody.
Then any of these venues.
No, the thing is, I think, as they mentioned, the waivers ate up what minimal amount of overtime they had to provide to these venues to give them a chance to work out an agreement. So because we didn't have the waivers or the subsidy in place July 1st, we've now into 3 months or whatever. So that's where the minimal overtime we gave them was eaten up. So Richard, let me ask one thing. Richard just asked, we were talking, is that, have we ever talked with, you said the bowl was a county event, or county facility, as to whether the county would contract with you, the board?
No, we basically just suggested to them that...
I mean, the sheriffs are more expensive, but whether, just like the sheriffs are on contract for our community colleges and things like that, our MTA, did you mention them at all as far as the county going into a contract for DOT services?
Now, that wasn't something that we even thought of at the time.
Just to, I remember the Bull's in my district. I'm proud of a county, state, federal, whatever facility. It's all government to me. That's the same people. So whether it's a county facility. Do you know who pays for the buses that bring people to the Bull?
No, I don't.
No, you may not know, but the MTA does through grants to all the supervisors. I don't want to do that. So they pay subsidized traffic. And you would say, as the Director of Transportation, if I was, in 60 Minutes, that you would say that is the best venue for getting people out of cars and taking buses to this facility. Okay? And then we have a freeway right there that has an off-ramp that dumps right into it. And we have a substandard on-ramp system, and there's some unique situations there that are different than others. You could say the one thing about the Los Angeles Arena, the convention center area, it's on a grid system, so that's there. If we pull out, the hazard or the cost to the city, if there's an accident there, will be greater than what the cost is here. There's got to be some way to figure this out, whether or not that each of the supervisors get a cut in the money, so the buses that come from the far west, the far south, the far east, all come through the supervisors of the county. It's sophisticated in that sense, but it is something that we can't walk away from. And I would ask that we, because I think this is September 23rd, and I know, when I did talk to that, I know Mr. Parks, I'm your alternate at the Coliseum Commission, and I know you've talked and led the way at the Coliseum. In talking to the issue of traffic and control, they said the one thing about the Bowl that you don't have, when people go to the Bowl, there's kind of a formality in that, and there's no roughneck kind of stuff, as people complaining between, Bach or Beethoven, as you have people complaining maybe between the Chargers and the Raiders, or when the Rams played there. There's this camaraderie of people going to this place that's on a hillside that's in a very unique area that, and they do pay for off-duty LAPD to do their motors, and they do get a relationship with the Explorers citywide that help DOT. There's a combination effort there that is there, but I would hate to see us walk away from this. And all I would ask is that we have to inform them effective January 1st that when there's, because I think that's a date, January 1st, that whatever they charge for parking, charge whatever your costs are.
This is why we started this conversation early on, to encourage all the venues to add additional money to their tickets, whether it's AEG, LA Live, Dodgers, in order to cover the costs for city services. This is what we wanted them to do in the first place. If it was 25 cents to 50 cents to $1, in order to cover their costs to pay us. So it's not, I really do have a problem with you characterizing it as us walking away. The department is not interested in walking away from anything.
I got that, but we haven't met with them until this summer. Okay.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but walking away is one thing. The city is in a financial crisis.
Can I just hold our conversation for a minute and ask, we have a comment card on this from Martha Sacedo? Yeah, from AEJ. Would you know what we're dealing with here, and be interested to hear what your thoughts are? And if there are anybody else in the audience from any of the venues who would like to also talk, please come on and fill out a card too. Go for it.
Good afternoon, members of the Transportation Committee. I appreciate a lot of the comments that have been made here. We were a little surprised just with respect to the timing of all this. We had received a letter in late July notifying us formally from the department that there would be significant changes to the policy. We met with the department on August 21st, so it's fairly recent. And during that discussion, I believe that what was communicated to us is there was a window where we would be able to reach some sort of a plan to adequately prepare for these significant changes. I completely understand that for reasons outside of LADOT's control, that timeframe has been greatly expedited. But, you know, as you can see, there aren't necessarily a lot of venue operators that are here today because we didn't receive formal notification that this meeting was taking place and that this item was being discussed today. We happened to notice it on the agenda. So I think one of the things that we're here to really emphasize is the fact that there absolutely does need, from our perspective, a transitionary time period where we can adequately plan for some sort of changes to take place. With respect to our venue, we're entering the busiest time period of the year. We are adjacent to major thoroughfares for the city of Los Angeles, including Figueroa Street and Olympic Boulevard. So we, too, believe that there are some public safety elements to the services that LADOT provides as it relates to traffic management. The convention center is going to see a significant increase of activity in the next year and plus. There are other large venues around us that all sort of contribute to the level of activity, and I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, we appreciate your comments. Mr. Willis, just to get back on the record here of where we are. You've contacted all of these groups, except for the Dodgers, where you've been trading phone calls and talking, and you've presented to them the reality of our moment. We don't have the funds to go forward with this.
We explained to them we were very shortly going to run out of funds. We thought when we met with them back, the groups that we met with in August, that we would actually have a month or two longer than we actually turned out to have. At the time, we thought the expenditure, at that time we spent $600,000 of the $1.2 million we had for the year, and we thought we would, the rest of the money would last until, say, beginning of December. So we thought we had the luxury of time to work out something with them. When we got the results and we realized that we had spent $800,000 in just the first 2 months, $400,000 a month, it's not hard to do the math to figure out how quickly it was going. And that's when it became essentially a crisis for us.
And as we're in this crisis right now, this day, the recommendations of the department for the committee is to do what?
The thing that would stop this, the free services immediately, would be to take an action to rescind, or to adopt a resolution that would rescind the action the council took back in 1995 that declared that the Hollywood Bowl, Greek Theater, Coliseum, Sports Arena, Dodger Stadium, and at that time the Olympic Auditorium were venues where if you do special events at them, they're basically, the general managers are authorized to waive the reimbursement. If that action was
mandatory or that you're authorized?
She was authorized, but it was very clear at the time because $200,000 was put into the department budget to compensate us for the loss of, the reimbursement. And so basically our budget was made whole, we were made whole through the budget process.
We need to see what that language was.
It's in the report that you have before you. The actual council action is there, and it authorized the general manager. It authorized the general
So
manager.
while my colleagues are looking at it, your first recommendation is to adopt a resolution rescinding the council action of October 27th, 1995, designating the Hollywood Bowl, Greek Theater, Dodger Stadium, Los Angeles Coliseum Sports Arena, and Olympic Auditorium as special events.
Correct.
Okay. If we take that action, then you're also saying direct the Department of Transportation to discontinue the provision of traffic control services free of charge, and then you mention them again.
And that's just basically to say that, if you take that action, just realize that, we're going to, you direct us, make it clear that we're supposed to cease the free of charge, provision of those services free of charge upon council adoption of that. That's basically effective immediately.
And you say your third point is direct the Department of Transportation to develop a public information campaign advising the public to expect additional congestion and either take transit or arrive early to those major events and so on. And the fourth point, you should direct the Department of Transportation to report back to the Transportation Committee in 30 days on the status of negotiations with the owners of major sports and entertainment venues to reimburse the department for the provision of traffic control services. In other words, we're giving you the stick and the muscle and saying, you got to act now. Is basically the point.
And that's basically all it is even though the money's almost gone, it leaves us hopefully with some money that we can use going forward to help fund responding some of these other activities.
Okay, with these as the recommendations for the council to act, colleagues, would you like to respond to this and see if we have a majority vote for this?
Let me just ask a question. Are the locations that you identified here, are they the same locations that LAPD is determined to be special event locations where they allow off-duty officers to work at? Or is that list?
I don't know that the two lists are matching lists. This was a specific action that was taken relative to the DOT budget back in 1995.
There's about 6 or 7 locations that the police commission has identified as special events that allow officers to work off-duty in uniform. The Coliseum.
They may very well be. I know, in fact, that they work at the Coliseum. I know that they work at Dodger Stadium, mainly crowd control.
But the thing is, I think if this list pretty well matches with LAPD and they're paying for the LAPD in uniform, such as they do at the Coliseum and the Greek and things of that nature, then it would appear that it's not that big of a stretch to add the DOT, because that's the same thing that LAPD did, is allow off-duty officers in uniform to work these venues. And that's a deal that they cut as an off-duty employee.
If they work inside the venue, not outside, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
They basically, the way the Coliseum explained to us is that they hire certain ones that work inside the venue, and that the police actually also provide patrol officers on duty around the venue.
Yeah, but the other issue is that if they are working privately and anything occurs, part of the reason they're in uniform is they can react in uniform to anything that occurs in or outside the building. And I think the bowl uniform people on motorcycles, I think they are paid as individuals. I think that's an off-duty uniform assignment.
Like a moving officer.
Yeah. So I think if we find out whether there's some consistency with these venues, that LAPD is providing off-duty uniform officers that are paid by the venue, it doesn't seem to be as big a leap in the sense of determining how and what amount of the traffic services should be dealt with in a similar fashion.
Right, and that's true. I agree 100%. The action that the council took back then was basically just to say that DOT is authorized to waive their reimbursement, but everybody else still gets paid.
Yeah.
I mean,
think the police commission made a similar act over time.
Yeah.
And they've added different.
I don't think that was the intent at all. And having been the only person that was there at the time,
okay,
I don't think that was the intent at all. It was specific to DOT, but it also gave you the authority to not waive fees. So there's no action that's required. What it said was, we give you the authority to waive fees, but there's nothing that prohibits you from not waiving fees. So there's no action that's absolutely necessary. The budget item is separate and apart. The fact that they gave you $200,000 that year was an indication that you could waive fees based on that $200,000. The fact that you got cut this year is an indication of the decision you have to make. But I don't see a need for the recommended actions, because there's nothing in the original resolution that deletes your authority. My concern here is not, I voted against the special events action by the council, specifically. I think it was right on, and it will be proven to be correct as time goes on, because we're going to have problems, and at these large venues we're going to have major problems, and so the bigger issue is one of the reasons I voted against it was there was no economic analysis. So we take Staples, or we take Nokia, or we take any one of these venues. Nobody did an economic analysis as to what revenue streams come to the city of Los Angeles because of their events. I have to believe that an event at the Hollywood Bowl generates more than $15,000 for the city of Los Angeles in terms of economic benefit, and probably in terms of tax revenues as well. I don't know. That analysis wasn't part of the decision. It was just slash and burn, basically. So the way I look at this, the Department of Transportation has a responsibility for public safety. It doesn't matter whether you had authority, whether you had money or not. If there is an ability for you to keep things safe, it is your responsibility to do it. Now, the question of who pays for that is a separate issue. But when somebody gets trampled in an event at one of these venues because DOT wasn't there, don't come crying to me about the fact that somebody got killed. This is a very serious issue, and you can't run away from it. You can't run away from it. You have to take each and every event and assess the public safety needs. Whether it's a special event or just a daily activity, because what's going to happen is there are going to be crowds that emerge in locations without proper transportation direction, and there's going to be problems that emerge, and your response to that is going to cost more.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I think the council erred by slashing the special events budget. And that's why I voted against it. I think these events are essential, not just to the mental well-being of our city, but to the operation and to the revenue stream of our city and to the benefit of our economy. I think that was what was contemplated in the original resolution. That's why it's there in 1995.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you can't negotiate with each of these venues. That doesn't mean that, in fact, I think you have full authority to do that now, and you should do that. But it's not going to be easy. And one of the difficulties here is we haven't said it, but DOT was particularly hard hit by the early retirement and the labor issues that we have with the engineers and architects. That exacerbates all of these issues, but the bottom line is you cannot run away from the responsibilities you have to ensure the public safety, whether you have the money or not. If you have to respond, you have to respond. That is the approach that the LAPD had. Of course, they have a separate budget item. And I'm with you. I believe that we need to do these things, and I believe we need to budget for them. And I believe we made a gross error, and that's why I spoke vehemently on the council floor against this. And these are just for these events. I think you also have responsibilities on the smaller events, because people in my district don't necessarily go to the Hollywood Bowl, don't necessarily go to concerts at Nokia, and don't necessarily even go to Dodger games. A lot of them do, but a lot of them don't do any of those things, but they do go to the community events that we put on. So I think there's an equal responsibility for us to manage those. So I don't have a good answer for you. I don't think we need to do the actions that you're taking, except the superfluous ones that say direct you to take care of the problem. The real problem is we need to get you more money. And, that's what we have to contend with. And until the council recognizes that, we're just going to have to plow through these issues one by one and do the best job we can to make the people safe and to ensure that we don't have a riot.
Okay, we appreciate my colleagues' comments, but the rubber has hit the road here. You don't have the money, and you can't provide the service unless you have an employee that you can pay. They're not going to do it as volunteers. So the obvious reality is, how do we get the venues to realize that there are no answers other than they have to cough up funding to help us, even though I totally agree with the multiplier effect of each event in the economy, how it works. All of these points of Mr. Labange and Mr. Alarcon are obviously real, but the bottom line is, if you don't have the money, how do you pay the worker, okay? That's the problem that you're facing. So by surfacing it today, you've clearly made it clear that time has run out. So what are our steps? Obviously, we're going to instruct you, go to those venues, go to those groups that have them, and tell them we have no more money in the bank for this, and they have to come up with a solution with us. What can we do as a committee to give you the strength or the ability, or what do we need to do as electeds to assist you in this? That's basically where we are, correct?
Well, yes, and committee members, I totally agree with you, and I've said this at the full council level, is that I too agree that we need special events, and we too are concerned as a staff about the safety of the public. I've been trying to run toward the danger and not away from it, and saying that, hey, the city's on fire. Is any fire truck going to show up?
Yeah.
And so just our wavering of things as we've gone along the way has really eroded our ability to responsibly kind of spread the money throughout the year, which was what my hope was, is that we'd have enough money to eat through this year and then make sure that we had our contracts in place for next year with all of these venues. You're absolutely right, Councilmember Alarcon. I can just say no. Just say no, I'm not going to waive the fees, and you have to pay. And so I can understand the uprising of the heat that will come over in this building at that point. It will be the sun shining directly in your offices. However, I don't have any problem with that. I've been there before. So we can say we're not going to waive the fee and you got to pay if we show up. But then again, we're hit with the public safety issue, because if they don't pay, we still somehow have to show up and make sure that people are kept safe. And you still have that commitment to me no matter what. Even if I have to come to you later, and this is where you will play a role and say, I need money in order to put in my salary account so I don't have to lay off 20 people because of these events.
Right.
Because that's exactly what will happen. If we go broke in the account because of events, then I'll have to come to you and say, if I don't get money, then I have to lay off people in order to make sure that I, have money to cover the salary for the rest of the year. I mean, I don't have the unlimited funding that some departments have.
Right.
So that's the reason why I didn't want to get to that point. So either way, it's going to cost us, but I totally agree. We can't leave the city unsafe. We have to lean on the vendors and say, you have to pay. I don't have any problem telling them no. Well, you got to pay, and they've got to respond, though. They can't just keep coming to you and saying, but there's no way we can pay. There's no way we can increase our tickets by $1. There's no way that we can get this money to you, because that's their response. And so that's the reason why we wanted to put it in black and white on paper. This is what we have to do. The special events ordinance, actually in the next 3 weeks when it takes effect, actually primarily does exactly what this report does. It just accelerates it. So if you want to put this off for another 2 weeks, and you see where we are, we'll come back to committee and tell you how far we got with the venues. They see in black and white what you could do if you wanted to take this issue up, continue this to the next meeting. We can do that. We can see how much reality check did they get as a result of this report.
Would you prefer the latter, though, for us to give you a stronger direct? You think it would help in your negotiations? I mean, I frankly want to get them to realize, as we're saying here publicly, that we just can't do it unless we have the funding,
Well,
and if they're able to do it, do we
I
need
think having the report clearly, that you've seen the report, and that you give them 2 weeks to kind of have their come to Jesus moment, it might help.
I think come to read a moment.
Well, that too. Now that Mr. Alarcon has given me new powers, of course.
But I think Richard is right. I don't see anything in the language that prevents you from doing this. But on the other hand, I think it would be important as you meet with him to determine how similar are the list of off-duty assignments.
I'll ask.
Because if you're dealing with that in the same venue, then the leap isn't that far. But
I can ask the police department to
yeah,
provide us
it's
that
about
information.
seven, it should be in the manual,
Mhm.
about 7 venues that they allow off-duty officers to work in uniform. And they do
Well-
it for the same reasons.
Mr. Parks, I was just, reading the report again and listening to everything. I'm sure this predates the Department of Transportation. 40 years ago, I worked at the Greek Theater, and there were tricycles there. Did you ever ride a tricycle? A three-wheel motorcycle?
Yes.
Yeah, but for the police department. You met your wife at 6th and Broadway? She went around the block. Okay. So, it's great history and with Bernard Parks. So, Rita, what I'm thinking and reading this thing here, why we did things is we did, 40 years ago, they didn't charge for parking at the Greek Theater. People just parked on the lawn as a park deal. In their contract with the group now, they have no stipulation here. So either the money comes from the park department, which gets $1.4 million usually each year, or it comes from where? The reason why I argue this here, because there's 2,900 spaces at the Hollywood Bowl, and we have this county-wide park and ride, and we use Highland Avenue. We can't turn it over to Explorer Scouts. We need professionals to manage that somehow, some way. And I don't know which venue, but one venue charged $19 to park, where, if it was 20, why, and even is easier because people could come in, flow. And I wouldn't, Madam City Attorney, ever approve a report that had number 3 in there, because that would, I think, make us real liable to anything that would happen. I can understand where you are. Mr. Chair, I'd like to just ask if we continue this 2 weeks, I will make myself available to invite the principals of all in my district, the Hollywood Bowl and the Greek Theater, to hammer it out with you, to have a come to Rita meeting, because it's a reality. I got that. But there's some confusion, and also there's some transit, and also there should have been a stop at the Hollywood Bowl for the subway, but the MTA or the RTD at that time chickened out and went through a mountain in there. You know, there should have been a stop there, right? It would have solved everything.
All right. As you can see, how the committee is responding to this issue, seeing a strong committee chair here on this, because folks have a lot of experience and understanding of it. So we're giving you the consensus of the group, which is come back in 2 weeks and let us know where you're at. But clearly, each one of us would be happy to participate with you in any meetings with any of the venues to give them the appreciation of where we are. We cannot, as a city, not serve these venues, but on the other hand, if we don't have the funds to do it, and they have to come up with it. I mean, I don't know what other, or the city budget has to come up with it.
Bill, you really have to listen to it.
So what do you suggest?
I'm not suggesting it. Mr. Parks already suggested it. If we can establish relationships with DOT officers to contract directly with an independent organization. The problem is that LAPD has the off-duty officers have a long-standing relationship with these venues and culture, and they know how to do it. But our parking enforcement officials, if we're paying them time and a half, we could stretch, we would just as soon take the 1.2 million, give it to these venues, and they could probably cut a deal with these officers and get twice as many hours by paying them straight pay, cash, consultant pay, as opposed to all the benefits and all that. That's what the LAPD does. That's what the police officers do. And I'm just saying that it's a bad year, and that might be, I mean, that's what Mr. Parks is suggesting. It's a little late in the game, but it may be a way to accomplish the same level of service with half the pay and keep the public safety.
Just one more point, Councilmember Alarcon. Our traffic officers also write citations and also bring in the revenues for the general fund. So they wear that dual hat. So that's the little bit of difficulty in providing that direct contract.
Now, the officer doesn't write a citation per se.
Police officers have the right to arrest.
Right.
They arrest people. Off-duty officers.
Right.
It may be a technicality. You may be right. Maybe it can be done. And
We can look at it. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
It's not unlike what police officers do. In fact, police officers at these venues are off-duty in uniform working for another vendor. If something should happen in the mix, they must go and work with the on-duty people.
Right. Well, in essence, we have an example because we've contracted with City of Pasadena. So this is, I believe, the sixth year where we've done a contract where they pay us, there's a contract, there's an MOU established. But the more, I just wanted you to be aware, because the more they do traffic control, the chances of us getting additional revenue from citations.
They can't have the enforcement money. That comes to the city.
That's Mr. Chair talking. We'll come to Bernard.
Even while they're working on it.
Don't get me started on that issue, but anyway.
Well,
But we'll look into it, sir.
Don't give up the enforcement money.
Alan, do you want to make another comment, or you?
Well, I just wanted to make Councilmember Alarcon aware that in these meetings, we have told the venues that we will not sacrifice public safety, that no matter what, whether we're out of money or not, if there is a public safety issue, we will respond, even if it means that we have to divert traffic officers who are on parking enforcement duty and send them over there to deal with that issue. But what we also explain to them and discuss with
you and Rita out there someday.
once we go through the academy, once we go through the academy.
What's your shirt size, Richard? I'll go out with you.
Okay. All right.
But the last thing is that what we also explain to them, and I think they acknowledge that a large part of what we provide there is not public safety related. It's congestion relief. And it's basically setting up the reversible lanes for the Greek Theater so that people get in faster and get out faster. It has nothing to do with public safety. The lanes are striped, the signals work, The traffic controls are in place. If people obey the traffic controls, it will just take them longer to get in and longer to leave. But they will be able to do it legally without problems.
Congestion creates both problems.
Okay.
But the behavior.
Thank you, we appreciate your comments.
Let me just say one thing. I think what we have to look at in this is that in looking at the venues that you put together, you have the plan set up, but I think also you certainly would have to respond if there's an emergency. The problem with responding to emergency, it's already in place. The fact that you're there in a preventive mode keeps the emergency from occurring. So it is to everyone's benefit to have some kind of working relationship, to be out there first, and then you don't have to respond. 'Cause I agree, if it's an emergency, we all have to go. But the issue is, what we're trying to do is put a Band-Aid on it before it becomes an emergency. But that's why the relationship has to be dealt with early on, to say, just as they do at the Coliseum, if there's 50,000 people, they have a number. They say, this is how many people we need. It's 80,000, we need this, and it's set up by formula, and everybody knows it when you rent the Coliseum. So there's no guessing about it.
Just stay here before Mr. Sachs, come on up.
Yes, thank you. I also, Pasadena Rose Bowl Parade, how does that work out? But I have a questions here, because why is Staples Center and LA Live Complex included in this? 1995, they didn't exist. So when was the modification made into this council action that was taken in 1995? Because they didn't exist. It was, I believe, the Forum in Inglewood. And I don't believe LAPD was, or LA Traffic was.
Just it when they came along.
Right. So then there was an action that was taken to adjust it. So then, we've had a budget crisis for almost 2 years now. Why wasn't this looked in previously? You made an adjustment to allow people to hold events and not have to pay, and now you want them to negotiate to pay when you're not taking action on rescinding the council action. So if you don't take action to rescind the council action, why would I pay something that you already told me I can get for free? Plus, you've had a budget problem for 2 years.
Thank you, Arnold, appreciate it. Appreciate your comment.
It was nice to hear them step up and say, the council didn't take action on rescind.
Yeah, well, I don't have the majority here willing to do that. So what we're talking, go ahead, please speak.
On the Staples, I believe it was part of the development agreement.
Right.
Yes. So it was part of the negotiated agreement,
To build the building.
during the development.
Okay. We really appreciate you bringing it to this moment, another problem that needs a lot of attention and action. You heard Mr. Labange say, and I know Mr. Parks feels the same way, Mr. Alicant, where we can work with you in any way in our capacities to assist you over the next 2 weeks, we will do. And what we'd like is, in 2 weeks, to report back quicker than that. If you can do it, you could report also to the Budget Committee, which obviously wants to know about it as well. We didn't give you the direction that you wanted, but as my colleagues were saying, the direction is already pretty implicit in past action. So you got our encouragement to try to make it work. If you feel we can play a role with you in it, we will. And if you want to bring it to Budget Committee in the interim, we'll be happy to hear it there. I'm sure Mr. Parks would like to wrestle with it again in that venue as well. Okay.
Just say no.
Thank you very much. With a smile.
Let Rita do it.
Marie, where are we?
If we can go back to item 5, it's a DOT report relative to the applications to Caltrans Cycle 3 of the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant. There's a DOT report on that.
Someone going to give up and give us a report?
Good evening.
Almost
night. My name is Arsene Mangasarian with LADOT. I'm here to represent item number 5. I'm so glad I'm not representing item number 6.
Aren't you glad? Item number 5, yes.
I think you have the report in front of you.
Yep.
The purpose of this report is to request council's authorization to apply for the state's HSIP grant. The deadline to submit the applications to Caltrans is on October 8th.
Questions I have, is this list of projects in priority order?
No, there is no priority requirement on them.
Did the department conduct outreach to the council offices prior to the
All
preparation?
council offices, CAO, mayor's office, departments of street lighting, Bureau of Street Services, and I think CLA was also involved, yes.
Colleagues, any questions?
No. Yes. Let me just say, you know, and when I look at the list, the concern I have is what we've expressed in the past. If you go through this list, you'll find, I think, certain things that at least concern me is that almost exclusively, you look at the numbers, let me get my notes. You look at the notes and you find that I think 11 of these projects are in the valley, 3 are on the west side, 3 on the east side, and 1 in the central part of the city. If you look at the projects that's recommended, there's not one project that's south of the Santa Monica Freeway and west of the Harbor Freeway. Not one. This happens to be a large part of the oldest part of the city, happens to be the most densely part of the city.
No, Wilshire's more dense.
Well, when you talk about, well, I'll give you dense for old. But when you go through it, this is something that we asked DOT to look at in the past, that if, when we make these decisions, you happen to be putting projects that, say, the 11 in the valley, happens to be the place that a good part of safety loo money came to the city, went in the valley. If you go and you look on the west side, they're the part of the city that has the most significant amount of traffic mitigation money that comes from development. And so we're just making richer communities richer, and we're ignoring the communities that, when we look at the sources of funds, that are getting minimal attention. And how we can keep ignoring south of the Santa Monica Freeway and west of the Harbor Freeway, I don't know. Even though we've done a ton of studies, we've done you guys did the South LA study. And so it just doesn't make sense that we would continually, because most of these projects were recommended by the LADOT, but these are the kind of things that we asked before, that before you make these recommendations, look at all the other sources of money that's coming in these communities and making some judgment so we can at least balance the playing field. You know, we spent, what, $110 million to fix Santa Monica Boulevard. Most of it was citywide, what, Prop A and C money. I mean, yet communities that don't have Prop A and C money projects basically funded $100-some million on one street. And yet, when we look at these kinds of decisions, we're still ignoring the same part of the community that is without the very necessities that these projects bring. And so when I looked at it, you know, the first thing you look at, even when you put CD8 on it, we're sharing some traffic signals with CD9, but yet when you look at the type of projects that are being recommended for funding, whether they're streetscapes and a variety of things, other communities need those as well as communities that are doing it with other funds too. And so I just don't know how LADOT couldn't kind of configure that and say, before we make these decisions, let's look at where did our safety loo money go? Where did prior Caltrans money go? Where did traffic mitigation money go? Because if you have a community with no development, you don't get mitigation money. And people that have millions of dollars of mitigation money, should we be spending citywide money to enhance what they're getting done in addition to these funds? So that's my biggest concern, is that we consistently miss the same communities that we've been telling you, and I've been on this committee now for several years, we consistently miss the same communities. And so, yeah.
Well, I would just want to say, just to add something there, on the ones that are there, Mr. Parks, in my district, are all railroad crossings with a potential hazard. Some in others' district, I believe in Mr. Carden's district and up the line, or railroad of crossings for hazards. And I also know in the last 2 decades, whether it's the Harbor Transitway and the improvements on the Harbor Freeway or the 105 freeway, significant dollars were spent in that area. I just think it comes in cycles that we have. I don't feel, and Central Avenue is getting $4.3 million for streetscapes, which I think is
I think that's the
3.6.
Okay, let's hold it
No,
down.
I just wanted, wait, I don't want to say something. No, but I wanted Mr. Parks to hear it too, because I think it's not like they're going to put flowers out there. They're putting safety on high-speed rail.
But see, I think, Tom, they just happen to be building a major train down Exposition Boulevard. There's
Which-
no mention of that. We also have those tracks on, if you're talking about
Slauson.
tracks that go down Slauson Avenue, there's no attention to that. You have, at least east of the freeway, you have the Blue Line, there's no, I mean, so these are things that are there. And if you read these projects in other communities, the same thing exists south of the Santa Monica Freeway.
There's no fast train that goes south on Slauson. It's a slow freight, if at all. It's not a high-speed, not 80-mile-an-hour Metrolink. I just wanted to stick up for them. All right.
Staff, go ahead.
Thank you.
For the most part, these were safety issues that we've had on the kind of in our history, and just didn't have the funds to fund them, and so we've got the money
That's exactly what I'm
available
saying.
to us, and so that's what we're
The
doing.
history has been that you forgot parts of the city.
With respect to the enhancement projects, those are CRA projects. They were enhancement projects. They ended up short, and they're trying to get money to complete the project. I advised against it. I didn't think it was a reasonable thing to do within the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is, you know, a safety program, and what drives it is accidents. Real accidents that are happening today, not potential accidents that are happening in the future. When we get the exposition line in, then we'll be able to apply for projects there, I think.
So you're saying the same thing the community tells us, when we kill them on exposition, then we'll come fix it. I mean, that's logic.
It's not my logic, it's the way the process is set up. I mean, we can put the projects in and try and make the argument that we're going to have, 16 accidents a year, but everybody in the state has
You could also
problems.
look at it that the other projects met that criteria.
I know, but the thing is, but let me say this, we're not sure that there are not intersections in the 8th district and part of the 9th and part of the 10th, the south of the freeway, that aren't in the same category. You remember a couple of years ago when we had a criteria of let's fix Exposition Boulevard? I mean, not Exposition, but Exposition Park, and we found out the criteria used by LADOT was several years dated. It was well before there were 3 museums and all the activity around SC. Now we're finally getting some of those funds on the MTA call for projects to fix the very corners and intersections that 3 or 4 years ago LADOT said didn't warrant that attention. So I'm just saying is that you just can't keep missing that. I mean, if you take the Santa Monica Freeway all the way to Mr. Rosenthal's district and go to the Harbor Freeway, that's a lot of city not to have one project.
I understand, Councilman
I
Park.
understand. I don't have any in my district either at this point, neither does CD 13. But we can see CD 7 has 5, Mr. Labange, you don't have any either.
Yeah, they're railroad tracks.
Okay.
Between another city. It's even in the other city, which we're making the improvement to get access to our city.
Okay.
Because people were hurt.
All right, at this point, I'd like a motion to recommend approval.
Recommend approval.
Second it. Oh, he's going to vote against it. You can vote for it? Okay, 3-4, 1 against. Thank you very much.
Okay. I got one amendment that the department staff meet with the councilman of the 8th district and drive around his district
Did we
next
have any
year.
public cards on number 5, by the way? I got so many things up here.
I know.
No, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Onward and
Food.
up. Go. Next.
Next, Maria.
We have item 8, which is the CEO and DOT report relative to potential new parking meters. Did you want to hear that or continue that? Item 8.
We have a card on this, Glenn Bailey. Have you stayed here? God bless you. Come on up. Sure you can. Staff, come on up. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on number 8? Arnold Sachs, I got a million cards. Where are you, Arnold? No? Okay.
Keep going.
Lord have mercy, young bard. Please, bring us up to date on this item.
Good afternoon, council members. On June 24th, at the committee meeting, DOT gave a report about potential parking meter locations. At that time, that was a list that was considered as part of the budget process. During that meeting, I shared with the committee that even if we installed more meters this fiscal year, that wouldn't generate any additional net revenue because of the expense of installing them. At the same time, the budget didn't allow for any funding for installing new meters. And as part of that discussion, the committee...
That's my gavel. Colleagues, listen.
As part of that discussion, the committee asked for DOT to report back on... I shared at the time that I felt the best way to increase parking meter revenue was to actually fully staff our parking meter maintenance and take care of the meters that we already have in the city. And we're challenged to maintain at this time. So the committee at that point requested the department report back on the resources needed to properly maintain our parking meters. So we surveyed the 4 other large cities in the United States that maintain more than 15,000 metered spaces. That's New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. And what we found was that, aside from New York, that has twice as much staff as anyone else for their meters, the other 3 large cities have a staffing ratio of 1,200 meters or metered spaces per technician. And if the city of Los Angeles applied that industry standard, then we're 22% understaffed currently. Even if we filled our 4 vacant positions that we have, would still only be 90% of the maintenance staff that other large cities dedicate, on a ratioed basis. In order to reach that 1,200 meters per technician, we would actually have to increase our staff by 3 additional technicians. So, our department has an outstanding team of technicians. They're working very hard to maintain the aging meters, but there's certainly only so many hours in the day. Based on the changes that we've made in the past year to increase rates, extended hours of operation, these aging meters are taking 50 to 60% more coins through them every day. The hours of operation have extended 20% beyond what they were previously, without any increase in staff. So we're facing increased vandalism and this aging inventory of meters. Regarding the revenue that would be associated with filling these positions, the department has estimated that if we filled all of the vacant positions by November 1st, that through the remainder of the fiscal year we could generate net revenue of $360,000. So every parking meter technician that's hired actually brings in more than twice as much revenue, meter revenue alone. And in addition to that, there's obviously more than revenue behind this. There's a service to the businesses and to the public in turning over those parking spaces and making the parking spaces available. That has sales tax implications. There's also citation revenue associated with that. So at this point, the department recommends receiving direction from this committee to attempt to immediately fill all of our vacant positions and keep those positions filled through the remainder of the fiscal year.
And colleagues, the bottom line is what they're saying is it not only does it pay for itself, but it generates more revenue than the position itself would do, and that it's an essential part of the revenue collection plus the community work. All right.
This is double referred.
Yeah, all right. Let me just before you do, let me just go my questions real quick, just for the record. What is the status of the parking meter RFP? When do you expect to release it?
At this point, thank you. At this point, the staff continues to work on the RFP for citywide meter replacement as well as for the Express Park project, which affects the downtown area that uses $15 million of federal funds to implement a parking guidance system as well as demand-based pricing. Those 2 RFPs are under development. We expect them to be released by the end of this calendar year. And obviously, we've replaced 15% of our metered spaces, and we're utilizing technology to the greatest extent possible. But again, there's only so much efficiency we can squeeze out of the available staff that we have. We know those technicians are working diligently, but it's really demoralizing every day to see that the same stuff you fixed yesterday is broken again, because we don't have the staff to really do a good job of maintaining our meters.
Second question is, what options does the city have to fund the capital costs, including the meters and signs? Can this be done through the upcoming parking meter RFP?
Is this the additional metered areas, Councilmember?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, this budget, all of our capital expenditures was taken out mainly due to the P3 conversation, so there are no budget for anything, for any new metered areas, so it would be part of the extended RFP.
Okay, the next question is, was this list generated in consultation with the council offices, or is it the department's technical recommendations on where it makes the most sense to implement new parking meters?
Go ahead, Dan.
Just back to the other subject, I guess, was the original list. That was developed in response to a request through the budget process. Those were the top 4 locations that the department had outstanding requests from council offices for. So those were requests received directly. I believe all 4 of those were received directly from the council offices, and just on a backlog because of inadequate staffing to pursue those.
Okay, before committee, did you want to speak next? I know you wanted to hear them, and then we'll go back to my colleagues. Go ahead. Or you want to hear my colleagues first?
Just real quick there, I just want to thank Ali Madavi, who works very hard for DOT in trying to solve problems, and also where it expands, it works. I would support what's recommended, except the only thing I would want is, I was going to use a bad word, rotten, that we give someone a ticket when it's at a failed meter. I just think if they sit there all day, I understand that when you chalk the tires, but some people get tickets when it's at a failed meter. We do that, don't we?
We don't do it on purpose, sir, no.
Oh, I know that, but no. But a failed meter, when there's a failed flag up, you give a ticket if it's...
No, we don't do that, sir. Unfortunately, with the aging meters, as Mr. Mitchell mentioned, historically, some of these meters have reset themselves and come back, and the officers have no indication, so we do have a process where we review every one of those calls, and, we go through
The other
the
guy was
process.
one on it. I did pick up 2 people from Ventura walking here. I was leaving City Hall around 7:30. They went over to MacArthur Park to some art gallery. They parked on the street, and they had the meter, and they put money in the meter. But there's nothing on the meter that says, which I've seen in other cities, a little label that says, like the sign, it mirrors the sign, no parking, 3 to 6 or whatever. They had to go. I took them over to Vertel's, and then $380 later, they were heading to Ventura.
Yeah.
So that's one thing too. But this is true. This is an operation. I don't know who has the downtown area has the most meters. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the Westwood area, and then the Wilshire area, et cetera, like that. Okay.
No meters in Councilmember Alarcon's district.
And Councilmember LeBon, just
Right,
respond to that point about the...
This problem...
We got a response. Could I have-
resolved in my district.
Is that a response?
Just to respond to that point about the restricted parking hours. New technology does provide for that response to the public. So
Right.
the pay stations that we've installed, as well as new single-space meters, the credit card single-space meters that we've been testing, will show on the display that no parking is allowed. They won't allow a patron to pay into a restricted parking time.
On a meter, but on those old meters, we're going to be there
The
for a
old
while.
meters we're trying to...
Where was the first meter installed in the city?
North Hollywood.
North Hollywood,
Yeah.
Magnolia, and Lancaster.
Very good.
When,
In fact, 60 years ago this past June, we forgot to have a party.
We're going to have one.
Richard.
Yeah, when we went through the budget process, the notion that certain city employees generate revenue was contemplated. And it wasn't supported by the CAO or the mayor, quite frankly. So how do you justify coming to the council with a specific request, notwithstanding all the other employees within the city ranks who also generate revenue and yet that was already considered and rejected.
Well, I think this is, as mentioned, Councilmember, in a direct response to the motion that our chair provided, just come back and give us the facts. And this is more of a factual presentation of the information that was requested. We fully understand what you just mentioned, and we had previously provided the managed hiring process procedure. So we understand that.
I'm not opposed to it. Obviously, if we can demonstrate that a position generates money, more money than what they cost us,
yeah,
I mean, that's a no-brainer. But how we justify it is quite often challenged. But I think the more important thing is for us not to look at this in the context of the Transportation Committee, but in the context of the budget responsibilities. And so I would be supportive of establishing a review process in the Budget Committee and the Personnel Committee to discern which positions actually generate more revenue than they cost, and do it in a holistic way as opposed to piecemeal, where, look, the fact of the matter is, people will criticize us for going back on what we did with the budget. I'd rather take one hit than 20. So I really think we should do it in a more holistic way. And I would support it. I mean, I have no question, as long as we can demonstrate it. And it's not just the ones that do the meters. All of them.
In fact, I think the CAO is looking at Department of Finance, Treasury, DOT, all those that are revenue to begin to make that assessment. But I would think that what was asked of looking at additional meters, it's impossible for you to consider those with the current meters we have, because we would not install those same meters, and until we get the RFP out and start changing the 40,000 meters, then we can start adding these 1,200. Plus, it should have less of an impact on personnel resources if you can pay by credit card, if you can pay by cell phone. You don't have to have a body go out and touch every meter to see if there's coins in the machine. And so, and then when you get the universal location, you don't have to go to every meter. You can go to that one point and cover whatever number of parking places. And so, I think the whole context of this changes when you have different technology on the street. But also, the issue of managed hiring is to look at those revenue positions versus administrative positions, and that's why it's set up in that fashion. But we're not in a position, even talking in the Department of Finance or any other place, to say, give me $2 million and I'll make you $2.5 million, because you don't have the $2 million to give. I mean, so the issue is that I think all of these have to be in the context of new technology once it's installed. And you should be asking other council officers, where else can we put them when the RFP comes out?
Approve this?
Yeah.
Can I make this? Please speak. I'm going to lose my quorum in a minute.
This is not about this aspect of the report that I want to comment on. This originally started as Motion 51 in Budget and Finance, which was to seek for the installation of additional metered areas, including 200 in Venice, and of the 1,250 meters that were identified, 800 of them were in Northridge. And I listened to the presentation at the June 24th meeting, and 800 out of 1,250 is an awful lot for Northridge. I computed how much area that would take for a relatively small area, and pursued that with staff to find out what would be involved. It turns out it was not for a new parking zone, as was indicated in the description here, but an expansion, I guess, of the existing old abandoned one, abandoned 40 years ago. But there were some erroneous assumptions, and I'm here just to make sure that this didn't somehow slip through of particularly the 800 parking meter spaces zone, whether it's a new zone or expansion of the old one, adjacent to Cal State Northridge and the surrounding area. But it does say in this staff report that you had, was staff is drafting report recommending installation of meters associated with a new parking meter zone in Northridge. And just so you know, part of the assumption was
for both sides of Nordhoff Street. The Cal State University Northridge specifically opposes meters along the north side of Nordhoff, which is their boundary, because they don't want any parking there along their university. And the south side of Nordhoff are single-family residential homes, and I don't believe the city normally puts parking meters in front of single-family residential homes. So I believe there's some errors there, and I just don't want you to somehow sanction or moving ahead of this let me just also say, very important, I went to all three of the neighborhood councils, two of which have been certified, one's organizing, none of which had been notified about this. So I think it's very important if, before staff says, is drafting report recommending institution of meters, why don't you go to the community? I also contact the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce didn't know anything about it either.
Cool, I appreciate what you're saying. Do you have any response to this?
On almost all points, Mr. Bailey's correct. There was in the original table, the description said new PMZ, it's an expansion of a PMZ, and the text on the status that we were drafting a report to recommend installation of meters, that was just a standard draft report, but no formal study of the zone has been done. So we're way ahead of ourselves, and in the process, what would happen is this expansion of a zone would come before the council, and before we presented a report, we would be talking with the neighborhood councils in the community and so forth.
Explain this map that I received that shows the zone.
Please do.
Ali Madavi.
Thank you for staying all afternoon for this moment. Appreciate it.
You're not parked to the meter, are you?
I took the transit.
Oh, good.
Go for it. Your name for the record.
My name is Ali Madavi. I work for DOT, and we were approached by the council office to look into the area and to do a study. Already there is an existing parking meter zone in the area. The council, which we don't have any meter, but the council asked us to extend the area to include Northridge and Zelza. So we did a study, and the study indicated that the occupancy was high enough that it justifies that. In some area like Zelza was over 90% during the time that we studied it. And based on that, we recommended to the council that these streets do qualify if the council decide to go forward with it. That was just a study and just a recommendation. Now, I don't know where the number 800 exactly come from, but we did not that 800, we did not do a detailed study to see exactly how many parking meter can be installed. So it could be 400, it could be more, I don't know that,
Okay.
but
Well, then just hold on to that point. Get with Mr. Smith in the district and with DOT, and we'll work this out, okay? So that it meets.
They will not wake up tomorrow and have 800 meters, I assure you.
Or next year.
Now, the recommendation
Or
is
next
to
year.
direct the Department of Transportation to submit the necessary completed managed hiring process forms so the CO can unfreeze these positions and can be considered by the Managing Hiring Committee within overall department and city finances. Would this go then to the Budget Committee? Is that the suggestion on this, or?
We're happy, based on all the conversations that Councilmember Parks and Alarcon brought in, we're happy to take this to the next level, which would be the Budget and Finance, work with the CAO, work with the CLA. So we're okay with that.
Mr. Chair, this item was referred to personnel as well as budget and finance, so I believe unless Mr. Parks would like to request it, it goes to personnel next.
Yeah, we're always last.
Yes. So this will go to personnel after it clears your committee, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I move that we clear this out of here and get it to personnel.
I second
and then
it.
over to.
Well, can I just clarify, you want to receive and file the report as written and then substitute the recommendation you made about the managed hiring direction?
Very good.
Great. That's
Goes to personnel, then budget and finance.
right.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Personnel, then budget and finance. Okay. Next item.
Okay. Did you want to hear item 9, which was the organizational chart? We're going to continue that.
Continue that.
That brings us to the special item number 1, which is the CEO report relative to the proposed contract with Veolia Transportation for the dash packages 1, 2, and 3.
And we do have a speaker on this. David Smith, are you here? God bless you for hanging out. Appreciate that. And we have a gentleman in the back as a bicyclist. Which item are you here for? Am I imagining that? Not you, Arnold. Got a million cards in. The other gentleman next to you over there, are you? No, you're just enjoying? Yeah, Arnold Sack, you're also speaking on this one. Yeah. Okay, who wants to go? Public speaker or?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Fine. Good afternoon, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is David Smith with MV Transportation. Appreciate this opportunity. MV respects staff's desire to save money and absolutely recognize the large difference in these contract prices. However, it is obviously puzzling to us, being a current operator. We were ranked higher for thoroughness and completeness. There was notation that Veolia failed to comply with the dedicated staff requirements. They plan to use our facility, our employees, and maintain the same salary and benefits, if I read the report correctly, yet they'll still save $10 million over 3 years. Should you accept Veolia's offer, we obviously will be disappointed. We thank all of our employees for doing a great job for the city. And again, we thank staff for our solid partnership and look forward to other opportunities to work with the city for the citizens of LA. So,
Thank you very much for your comment. Mr. Sack.
No, you
Right, come
need
to the
to
mic
speak
and-
to the mic if you're going to...
Yeah, but it goes on the record.
Thank you, Arnold Sachs. Well, actually, now that I'm here, two points. First, it's Veolia, and their track record with Metrolink. No pun intended. And I also was going to ask in public comment, but I can ask now since it's with the Veolia contract. Report on the revenue that's been generated to LADOT since they stopped accepting script or fair presentation from MTA for use of the dash in the LADOT. You know, now you have to pay. You can't show your pass for MTA to get on the city bus lines. You have to pay. Any way to find out how much revenue's been in? Just to bring it up to date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Can we have a report real quick?
The CAO report recommends approval of the department's request to enter into a 5-year contract. That's a 3-year initial term and 2 one-year optional extensions with Veolia for the operation of dash packages 1, 2, and 3. Over the 3-year term, the contract will not exceed the $65 million bid by Veolia Transportation, and funding is available and budgeted in the Proposition A adopted budget.
Questions, colleagues?
Let me just ask, I went through the process. The one thing that I can't figure out is if we're going to pay for the petroleum, and they're going to, as the speaker said, keep the resources, where did we find $10 million difference? And is that a real $10 million, or are we going to be in a situation on a year from now making adjustments? And so I just need to find out where did the $10 million actually get recovered if we're not cutting salaries and benefits?
Corinne Ralph with the Transit Bureau. The $10 million is over a 3-year period, approximately $3.4 million a year. And that is for 3 separate packages. Package 1 and 2, which is approximately $7 million over 3 years, and then $4 million for package 3. Most of the differences between MV and Veolia was in about 3 or 4 areas. It was primarily administrative costs, which included workers' comp, insurance, corporate overhead, and I believe profit.
When you list workers' comp and insurance, are we saying that they had less need to use it? Is it less for their policies, or do they get less coverage?
I don't believe they have less coverage. That's the cost that they had indicated that they would need to, use to cover all the insurance.
So they're less expensive plan.
Yes.
But the same level of coverage.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a minimum required level for insurance.
But do they have a different rate?
Pardon me?
Do they have different rates?
There are different rates, yes.
And is it based on experience?
I believe that's an item that they shop around and you know,
No, I
they-
don't.
they-
No, it isn't. It's an item that is based on your experience. If you had work-related accidents, your modification rate goes up, and so you pay more. So I think, but $3 million a year, that's a lot.
It is a significant difference, and it certainly got the attention of the evaluation panel. And the areas that once we scrutinized the numbers between the two contractors, those were the areas, the 4 areas that I just mentioned.
Okay, now you
where the
mentioned workers' comp and insurance. What were the other ones?
profit and corporate overhead.
So basically their plan is to make less profit margin.
Less profit margin, yes. All the numbers that I just mentioned, all the areas I just mentioned, they were significantly lower in cost than MV.
Okay. With the corporate overhead, is that supervision in the field, or is it just administrative costs at headquarters?
It is the cost of support to the particular project. It is the money paid for the parent company, the corporate
paid for what?
headquarters. The corporate headquarters would normally charge a percentage of the contract for things like accounting and legal and other support services to the particular contract. So each contractor has a different percentage that they use. MVs tend to be higher than.
You know, the other thing that's
Field.
interesting, when we were thinking about extending the old contract, if I remember correctly, as we had those discussions before we went out to RFP, this company had a higher request to extend it than the other company.
The existing rates for Veolia for package 3 had been higher from the beginning.
I know, but they then asked for a higher rate on, is that true or what?
I believe that they agreed to continue operating at their current rate for 3 months with no increase at all, and then if we continue to need a month-to-month beyond 3 months, that they would go to a CPI increase. So there was no increase at all on their rate for
For
3
3 months. But what was the overall request if it went beyond 3 months?
It was a CPI of...
A 4.5% increase after the beginning of the 4th month
The 4th month was how
of
much?
the extension. A 4.5% increase.
Okay, what was the other?
Do you remember what MV was?
MV used the figure that they had proposed. I believe it was a 76 change as the starting rate for package 1 and 2.
It was a significant increase over what we're paying them currently.
I didn't hear you.
I believe it was a significant increase over what we're paying currently.
So they had, do you know what the percentage
I
for the
don't-
month-to-month?
It was about, it increased from 68 to 76, so approximately $8. So about 12%, I guess.
The thing is, so it will all play out in the long run, but I just hope that we're not here in 2 years or whatever and saying that it's like we have contractors come in and they come up with these change orders. And again, if we're paying for the petroleum, and the other thing is that we not end up with a situation where medical or workers' comp come back to bite us because the employees are getting less service. Those are things that are going to be very relevant.
Well, I would just add a couple real things real quickly. First off, the city is indemnified by the contractor for all insurance costs, so the city is not going to be on the hook.
Oh, no, I'm not saying the hook. I'm talking about how employees are treated.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation, and they're trying to project over the next 3 years what their costs are going to be. Sometimes firms are more aggressive in trying to keep costs to a minimum. Others want to pad their costs to make sure that they don't run into a situation where they're losing money. I will say that in terms of Veolia, they've never, in the 20 years that they've been running service, or their predecessors have never come to the city and said that they're not going to continue running service. They need more money.
No, I think we've only had one company do that to us.
Yes.
Correct.
We've only had one
We won't
company do
won't
that.
name names. And we are very careful when we review proposals, because there's always situations where one firm is more expensive than the other. And as you are aware, we've come to this committee on a number of occasions and recommended a firm that is more expensive. because we felt it was in the city's best interest to spend a little more money to get that extra bit of quality. In this case, as Corinne mentioned, the higher cost was associated not so much with things that directly result in the provision of service like staff hours and staff wages. It was more in the area of administration and profit, where we felt that it wasn't worth the $10 million investment of the city for what we would get back.
The thing is, if we're saving $10 million over 3 years,
Yeah.
it's well worth it, as long as we don't come back with unintended consequences, that we balance it out or pay more down the road.
If the contractor were to come back in 6 months or a year or 2 years and say, well, we bid too low, we need more money, our response would be, you either finish the contract or we're going to go back out to a new RFP.
All right, thank you.
That was the key question. Is the contractor here? Thank you. Thank you for staying here. You heard the conversation and the interaction, right? And you obviously appreciate the direction they were making in their conversations. Okay, is there anybody else on public comment on this? Have a motion to move forward with it? So moved. Second, a unanimous decision on it. Thank you very much. What other items left? Is that it?
Public comment?
We got some public comment from our dear friend Arnold Sachs. We have David Shapiro. Are you here, David? He's gone. Then we have Arnold Sachs and Arnold Sachs. And then we got Glenn Bailey. You're done. Glenn, you're done. Okay, great. You coming up? Okay. We got Glenn and Arnold.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. And
You're welcome.
I appreciate the fact of the change, a little bit of change in the way that you ran the meeting. I'd appreciate it even more if you allowed staff reports to occur first, so that the public that's here can partake of that information when they make their commentary.
Point well taken. Thank you.
There were 2 items today, both requiring some kind of council action. One dealing with the DOT report relative to traffic management, because you have a previous council action that allowed those items to be, those locations to have free service. And the other one dealing with the mayor signing the contract with Nygaard, Nelson Nygaard?
Yeah.
I didn't hear any action being, that this council would, that this committee would further that action to the city council itself to either override those actions or not override those actions. So, in essence, there was a lot of talk, but I don't necessarily know that the subject was addressed. So I'd like to know where that stands.
That item will go to council.
Excuse me?
That item needs to go to council.
They have to go to the council. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. One more guy. I'm losing everybody.
I'd also, very quickly then, like to make a suggestion that you send to the Rules Committee to address the administrative disconnect windows that occurred in that contract due to the fact that the chairman of the department moved on to another, and so that anything could occur, another chairman could move someplace, or a chairman could pass away.
You're right.
And the window could be open again, and we don't really want to have administrative disconnect in the
Appreciate
city.
that. Thank you for
I'll
your
leave
thoughtful
another
comments. Appreciate that. Glenn Bailey. Reed, I need you for a minute before you go out, before you go. This gentleman, and then don't run out. Go ahead.
First of all, Councilmember Rosendahl, congratulations on chairing the committee. Good intonations, right. I share something a little common in taking over the city's bicycle advisory committee earlier this year after a long time, actually since the inception by the previous chair. I just wanted to share with you, and I mentioned to a couple of your staff persons, the recent situation, I don't know if you're aware of it, with regards to Reseda Boulevard, and the issue of one portion of DOT saying that they could design and ready to install bicycle lanes, to be told by another section of DOT that we're not going to allow that to happen because we're going to be putting in peak hour lanes shortly. And that was in writing. And then when I attempted to exercise my civic rights to really to push to get the bicycle lanes in. I feel that my integrity was impugned by certain persons. The important point I want to make here, this is obviously a specific issue in a specific area in a council district that's not represented here today.
Right.
But the important issue that I wish to discuss with you and your staff, and that I wish to have this whole committee look at, is there are things going on with the installation of peak hour lanes that when my research on this issue, I could not find that there had been any city council motions with regards to the neighboring streets that have been installed for peak hour lanes. And it seems to me that this affects a lot of people in a lot more ways than a lot of other issues that do go to city council. So I am asking if we could look at the policy in this regard, that it shouldn't just be, as it appears that it is, one person in a district office, and maybe it goes somewhere internally within the department, without notification for the people who are affected, who either have homes on the streets, who have businesses on the streets, the neighborhood councils that represent the particular area, and in our case, the bicycle advisory committee, or et cetera, with regards to this whole process. It should, in my opinion, be a public process that goes through the process, including this committee, and frankly, the full city council.
Okay.
Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what my research is.
Ms. Roberts, she's listening to this, and she'll respond to that. Thank you. All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.